town council meeting, so would you please take your seats? Here's Deb. Here comes Deb. I'm hoping that we have a quorum.
Paul's here.
Is Paul? Okay, okay. Do we have an idea? Whew, we have a quorum. Just because the feds aren't working doesn't mean the town isn't. At any rate, the president, Town Councilor Jim Crocker, is delayed for a bit, and he has asked me to open the meeting. He'll be with us shortly. So first, I want to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting, January 7th, 2019, of the Town Council. And I would like to begin and ask the clerk to take roll call.
Councilors Biedenbender.
Here.
Crocker James. Cullum.
Here.
Dagwan.
Here.
Flores.
Here.
Rapp Grassetti.
Present.
Hebert.
Present.
Levesque.
Present.
Neary. Schnepp.
Here.
Steinhilber. Tinsley. Wallace.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. First item of discussion tonight is to ask everyone to please silence their phones. And secondly, under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, I must inquire if anyone is recording this meeting, and if so, please make yourself known. Not seeing anyone, I would ask us all then to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Councilor Dagwan has asked me to allow her to say a few words about the moment of silence.
I would ask that everyone keep Alan Goddard, who passed away recently. Alan is a lifelong resident of Cape Cod. His family concentrated many, many years living in the area of Hyannis. A 30-plus year member of the Hyannis Civic Association. Alan has been on the Civic Association through at least 5 presidents. What I remember about Alan had a great memory. He knew the history of this town. He knew the history of Hyannis specifically. He leaves a brother. And I ask that we just keep his family in prayer. And I say this on behalf of myself as well as the Greater Hyannis Civic Association.
Thank you. I'm going to ask that we take something out of order as the first order of business, out of respect for the public's time. I'm going to ask the council for permission to remove from the orders of the day under old business, item number 2019-042, and postpone action until our next regular meeting on February 7th. The reason for that is twofold. One, it's my understanding that if more time is spent on the maps and the neighboring descriptions, it's going to be helpful for our deliberations. And also with the absence of 3 of our councilors who want more input into this, I'm going to ask that we move it to the February 7th, 2019 meeting. So I will entertain a motion to do that.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Notice one is opposed. Motion carries. That is a vote. Next item on the agenda will be public comment, so all of those wishing to address the council, please come forward, sign in, and state your name for the record.
Cheryl Powell. And for once, you had the microphone down, we're right in the right place. Thank you. I understand that you are strapped for time tonight, so I won't even be taking 3 minutes. It's one thing to be able to come before the town council and grumble, but I think it's even more important to come before the town council and express gratitude, especially where it's more than due. As you know, I came before the council last time and was pleading that we could have a full membership on the HHDC. We have since received one new alternate. I know one of our previous members has gone up to full. Thank you very much for the new alternate. She's spectacular. So thank you for that. And last night was her first night. Sadly, we would not have had a quorum if it were not for the fact that we had to use that wonderful new alternate and another alternate, and that's the only way we did have a quorum. And I know there's another matter for you tonight. President Crocker did request that I send a letter, which went out this morning, and I'm not even going to elaborate on it because I'm sure that will be dealt with in a more appropriate manner. The real reason is to say thank you very much with the communication with the town council. I've had the pleasure, since speaking last time, to speak with Mr. Flores. Thank you very much for helping some of the concerns.
You're welcome.
And thank you so much. And also I wanted to express, not only on behalf of myself, but on the entire commission, that last night we were honored with the presence of President Crocker and Jennifer Cullum at our HHDC meeting. It showed very much the importance that the town council places between helping this board to heal and to move forward, and I thought it was well worth even coming out in the cold and keeping to less than 3 minutes to come and say thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Anyone else here for public comment? Please come forward. Be sure to sign in and state your name.
Yes, I'm Margaret Ryder Kornblum. I'm a Cape Cod resident. I live in a family house that's been owned since my family since 1848. And one of the few remaining families that still own property. As you consider the Short-Term Rental Act and the fees and the permits, et cetera, that go with it for the town of Barnstable, I'd like you to be aware of a few things. For many of us that rent, and these are not rentals that are by the day, these are rentals for the summer, for July and August. Most of those leases are written now. We were 98% rented by the end of January last year. So we are struggling now to deal with these laws. The state of Massachusetts has said it might take them a month or two. I would urge those of you who are working on this for the town of Barnstable to get this done ASAP, please, so that we have some guidance and we can figure out what we're doing. Some issues to consider as you look at the town requirements, you know, the permits, everything else, please be aware of the costs that homeowners have to bear here. We're already going to have permits and registration with the state. Many people are going to have to go out and get liability insurance, and they don't have it. I was reading an article that people in the Mass Fair Plan can only get $500,000 in liability insurance, which is going to put them at risk for the Massachusetts requirement of $1 million in liability. When we went out to get insurance, we found many insurers will not cover rentals. We did this a couple years ago. We had to go to 10 different companies. It ended up costing us about $1,200 more, and we got the liability insurance as well. But many people won't cover houses built that are on the Cape, within 2 miles of the water, within a quarter mile of the water, built before 1900, on the National Register of Historic Places. There are just all these different reasons why insurance companies will not cover people. So you're going to be aware of that, please, as you look at the different costs that you're putting on people. Another consideration would be many of us, unlike in Boston and the rest of the Massachusetts, many of us are residents here and we rent out our own homes. And it'd be nice if there'd be some consideration in fees for the people that are actually residents, who are seniors and retired. Another big issue is, when is the tax actually going to be due to the town? Airbnb pays homeowners after the renters have taken occupancy. VRBO pays homeowners that have been with them for a year at the time of the booking, pays part of it and the rest later on. I would urge you to consider that the rent should not be due until the quarter in which the rental actually occurs, because people can actually cancel. And it's unfair to put the burden of having to go recover tax paid in advance onto the homeowners. So please consider that. And just remember, as you do all this, that our renters eat here, they do whale watches, they play miniature golf, they shop, they spend money in restaurants. Let's not kill the rental industry in the Cape as you do this. But I just urge you to get this done ASAP so that we can figure out what we're doing.
Fine,
Thank you.
We are working on this, and there actually is a presentation scheduled tonight. That's why you're here. Great. Good timing. Is there anyone else who wishes to make a public comment? Good evening, Z. You
Zenas
have 3 minutes.
Cronker with the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition. How's everybody tonight? I just want to take a few minutes in gratitude, first of all, to echo something a former speaker just said, to thank the town councilor, thank Mr. Crocker for just arriving, hello, and thank really the work of the town manager, Mark Ells and Dan Santos, for all the work they did to put together the draft plan. And I'll call it a draft plan right now for the comprehensive wastewater issue that we face and the plan that we're going to get going forward. Hopefully we will be able to deliver that to DEP and they'll approve it sometime later this year in the fall. I think that's critical, and the work going forward is going to really be particularly important. And the particularly important part of the work that I want to mention tonight is the plan is one thing, and the question is going to be, how do we fund it? And 2 years ago, when we had the RAC committee, the Water Resources Allocation Committee, Advisory Committee, come before you, a number was tossed out. There were a few different numbers. One of them was $700 million, and when a lot of councilors heard that, I could see their eyes kind of roll in the back of their heads for good reason. There was once a guy who said $1 billion here, $1 billion there, and pretty soon we're talking real money, and this is real money. But I think the council needs to start to get on pace to bring the choices about funding before the public. We need to start to talk about that, to look at what the opportunities are going to be, whether it's a revolving fund or what the other areas may be that we can actually move ahead. I'm very pleased that we just completed a dredging project that my group funded in great regard, about $1.5 million. We were able to get a matching grant from the state that the town was able to take advantage of for $1 million. And my point in bringing that up is there may be other opportunities like that going forward as we look to move ahead with the plan. Now, against the plan, what I'd like to see us all talk more about is making sure we have the horse and the cart in the right position. So we're looking at some things, and we're continuing one vote on the zoning, and we're going to look at another issue at the Board of Health coming up on Tuesday. Issues that I believe should be tabled until we have the comprehensive plan in place and moving forward. And once we have that plan moving forward, we'll be able to prove that we're reducing nutrients and nitrogen in the water, and we'll be able to move forward with more development in a very thoughtful way. That doesn't mean we can't develop today. I think there are going to be mechanisms to do that. I've said publicly that we're willing to fund alternatives that could be in areas where municipal treatment isn't going to arrive anytime soon. I encourage this council to bring forward and have a group meeting with some of the other committees in the town that are vital to this effort. The Board of Health, Conservation Commission, the Zoning Commission. Maybe we can have a meeting all in one room and start to talk about the comprehensive nature of this issue and this effort. Councilor Biedenbender brought that up last time we met. I think that that's critical. Go ahead, Mr. Flores. We are working.
You know it's 3 minutes in. You're a
3
little bit
minutes
over.
in?
You're already over, so.
Okay,
you can wrap it up.
I'll say one other thing. The EPA we're working closely with. We're also working closely with the Nature Conservancy, and they're important to our alternative efforts. I'd be happy to bring them in to present to the council in the future at your invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Vice President. Anyone else like to address? Please sign in, make your name known.
Good evening. My name is Gordon Starr. I'm a member of the Infrastructure and Energy Committee, the newly formed committee here in town. I have two concerns. One concern is is Vineyard Wind you guys spent a lot of time working on the host agreement, and it's coming along well. It's a great opportunity to bringing in renewable energy into the town. And I think that instead of earmarking all the money in one direction tonight, that maybe we could think about keeping our options open. And I know we need some staff in the DPW in the energy sector. We had a person a year and a half ago, but we don't have anybody right now who's committed to energy policy. So that's one thing. And the other thing would be what Mr. Crocker just said is we do need a local comprehensive plan. We haven't had one since 2010. It should be done every 10 years. It takes 3 or 4 years to write a plan like that. So I think the town needs to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else choose to address the council? Going once, going twice. I'll close the public comment section. Councilors, would you like to respond to the public comments? I'll start on the end. Councilor Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make comment on 2 items. Margaret, I'm sorry I didn't catch your last name, but certainly thank you for bringing up the issues about the rental tax, and we need to work as hard as we possibly can to make it as smooth and as comfortable for as many of our citizens as we possibly can. And the other thing I'd like to just say to Zenas Crocker is I think that we talk a lot about innovative alternatives, but I think we have to, as a community, and possibly working with the council, is to actually have some forums on what we mean by innovative technologies and alternatives to septic, so that we put some flesh to the concept, because we talk about it, and I don't think people think that it's maybe real, and there are some great alternatives out there, and we need to experiment a lot more with that. So I hope that we can all work together to make something happen positively on bringing that information to our community. Thank you.
Councilor Biedenbender.
Thank you, President Crocker. To everyone who came forward, thank you very much for your thoughtful comments. To Ms. Kornblum in particular, those are great suggestions for us to be considering as we're moving forward, and we will. So please be assured that we will be very thoughtful in our deliberations as we move forward on this. I also, to Mr. Starr, I just want to thank you as well. I have similar concerns, and we'll be discussing that later in regards to the in regards to the Vineyard Wind monies and how they're going to be earmarked. So thank you. And Councilor Hebert already made that. Thanks.
Any other councilor response? Hearing none at this time. Thank you very much. I would like to ask the council, with your permission, please, could I go to the agenda and take an item out of order, please? I would like to take new business, item 219-075, out of order for all those people who may be with us tonight that don't need to ride the bench on some of our other business. Do I have a motion to take the new business of 219-075? I have a first and a second. Is that comfortably recorded, Madam Clerk? Thank you very much. 2019-075 is an appropriation and transfer order in the amount of $250,000 for the community housing creation by friends or relatives with autism-related disabilities, Inc. I would ask that somebody refer this to a public hearing for February 7th, please?
So moved.
So I have it first and seconded to be moved to a public hearing on the 7th of February. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? One opposition. Any abstentions? Please record it as such. Thank you. That's for everyone who's here for the purpose of making sure that this got to a second read. It's headed to a second read, and that is the time that we'll ask you to come forward and speak on the item. Thank you very much.
Could I ask for clarification?
Yes.
Who was the opposition? Oh, you were, Deb, oh, okay.
So it's all set. It's going to the next read. Please come to the next read is the point where it would be appropriate, and this was so that you didn't have to ride the bench with us all night.
But you're welcome to stay.
But it's great to see you. I'd ask the town manager to come forward for communications, please. We might give him a minute mark to leave in an orderly fashion. Mr. Town Manager, I have in front of me a document with the town manager's updated report for a period of January 4th through January 17th. Please proceed. Nice to see you, Mark. Thank you.
Good evening. Nice to see you as well. Mark Ells, Town Manager. My report from January 4th to January 17th. We're proceeding with the tasks in the Budget Action Plan calendar for FY 2020. As scheduled, we are planning to hold a public hearing, and I note tentatively scheduled for February 12th, but I just signed the notice that it will be on February 12th at 10 a.m., so I'll put out public notice and a reminder at your next meeting. This will be for proposed fiscal year 2020 fee changes. So any of our fees that are fiscal year, we just held one in November for calendar year. So we encourage all to attend. It'll be in this room. It'll be televised. We typically take them under advisement and allow for public comment for those who can't attend. We had a progress meeting on January 7th, 2019 with Fish and Wildlife to discuss the future potential to site water supply wells on the 250-acre parcel owned by the Commonwealth that directly abuts the Hyannis Public Water System. The town desires to continue working with Mass Fish and Wildlife to finalize an agreement that would enable the town to install public water supply wells on the 250-acre Hyannis Ponds Wildlife Management Area. We plan to submit our recommended proposed public water supply well locations tomorrow. Subsequent, and this was something, as we met with the commissioner and staff, we came to agreement that that would probably be the best way to do it. We've done modeled runs, and at this point, we're ready to go to them and make suggestions through DPW and our water supply division as to how we would see this proceeding to field study. Subsequently, a meeting will be scheduled to review and proceed toward the signing of an agreement by March 31st of this year, describing the conditions for the investigation of said well sites and possible use of that land for the water supply well. So we're still in that investigation stage, but at that point, we're out there in specific locations on the ground beginning the process, and that's what we're looking to have agreement on by March 31st. We wanted to put that date in because I had reported to you at the last meeting that it was time that we begin to set specific objectives, and hopefully we can make them, and if not, hopefully we establish reasonable modifications. So we're progressing, and we'll keep you advised. I reported last meeting that the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection had scheduled a meeting on January 16th in response to a petition from the Conservation Law Foundation and Toxic Action Center DPW Director Santos gave oral testimony at a DEP hearing in Boston on the petition by the Conservation Law Foundation requesting the DEP establish drinking water standards for PFAS and to immediately adopt a health advisory level for PFAS of 20 parts per trillion. The current advisory level is 70 parts per trillion. Director Santos reported that adopting a 20 part per trillion standard would have a significant impact on the Hyannis water system. I also believe it would have a significant impact on many other water systems. Director Santos testified that the state should proceed under their current system of evaluating new maximum contaminant levels on the basis of public health study, cost benefit, available treatment technologies, and sampling protocols. He further pointed out that DEP needs to be consistent in policy and procedures regarding how sources of contamination are regulated and enforced to support its review of the PFAS drinking water standards, meaning that we can't, the two can't not coincide with one another. If we're going to look at protecting public health relevant to this issue, we have to make sure that on the contamination side, they are consistent in that protection of public health. And we've had examples right here in town, meaning point sources that have caused contamination. So we will continue always to work with DEP. DEP took the testimony. It wasn't a discussion back and forth. They took the testimony under advisement, and as this progresses, we'll keep you advised. On November 27th, at last year, 3 p.m., I attended a Board of Health meeting to further discuss the proposal to eliminate or modify the interim saltwater estuaries regulation. The hearing was continued to the 22nd, that's next Tuesday. I provided an overview to the Land Acquisition and Preservation Committee on Monday, and the video of this overview is available for review on our website, and I gave you the link. I also, at the request of Councilor Bienenbender, I believe, send that now. Was it you, Jen? I can't remember who asked for that, but I send this to Cynthia so that you can have these links so you can click on them, okay? So I did that. I'll do that here forward. And we'll keep you advised as we continue to discuss this issue. The town's cable license with Comcast of Massachusetts expires on December 31st of this year. As part of the renegotiation process, the town has retained outside counsel who represents a number of communities statewide on cable-related issues. Legal counsel initiated a license compliance review and began meeting with the Cable Advisory Committee Chair, Nancy Richards, and town staff, including Director Milne, Director Wood, Director Poyant, Attorney Weil, and Dave Kenyok from our public schools. Discussions have also begun with Terry Duenas, Executive Director of Cape Cod Media Center. The internal working group identified above is scheduled to meet with Comcast again on January 29th to discuss the specific terms to be included in the renewal license. On January 10th, 2019, I received a memo that I've attached from the school superintendent informing me of the school committee's action relevant to the Waldorf School property in Katuitt. After that meeting, I received a lot of telephone calls and emails. There was some confusion relevant to it. Basically, this is a decision at the end of the term of a lease not to renew the lease again. That falls under the authority of the school committee, and therefore there really is no action required on behalf of the town manager except an acknowledgement of receipt, quite honestly. Most of the calls I received were relevant to the decision of the school committee. So fortunately, Attorney Weil has reached out and discussed with the Waldorf school representatives, and I believe is still in discussions with them about this, and further requests would have to go back to school committee for consideration. If a decision were made, for example, with this group or another to move into another lease, then the town manager would be involved. If this were a situation of modifying the lease or terminating, the town manager would be involved. But basically, this was just exercising a condition within the lease, which was that it expires this June. So there was a lot of confusion around that. So I thought I'd just share with you the memo that I received. Thank you.
Any questions of councilors? Yes, Councilor Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mark. So, Mark, on number 3, which in some ways ties in for me on number 4, because as we look at the damage being caused by the PFAS, and known to all of us, and obviously they're requiring that we continually reduce the amount it's almost 3 times. They're saying now go to, the tolerance is 20, so it used to be 70, so that's a big hit, obviously. But, so again, I guess, and it's universal, and it's also national, and it's also state, and so anything that we can do to encourage, again, for us as a community and as a region to be really the cutting edge on this. So I really appreciate that yourself and Director Santos is really looking at any kind of technology, anything that put us ahead so that our water systems are pristine, as close as that we can possibly do. And I know that's expensive, but they say, as they say, if we don't do anything, it's even more expensive down the road, especially when it involves the health of our people. So I just want you to know how much we appreciate what you and what Director Santos is doing, and I personally fully support all the efforts that you're putting into, and the sky's the limit in what we have to do to protect our water. Especially when you're looking at where is it coming from, where's it being contributed, and if we don't stop it, if we don't reduce it, and we keep adding to it, we're just adding to the problem down the road. So thank you for your efforts.
Councilor Rep Cressetti.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mark. I'll start with the Waldorf School. Of course, you know, a lot of my constituents have contacted me, and it's too bad that the number of students has diminished from 120 to 60. So, and it's also too bad that they had problems meeting their obligation of the lease. I think from what's been communicated to me, there's been a little bit lack of communication on behalf of Mr. Anthony towards the group, and that's their, you know, that's their, I don't want to get in the middle of it, although they have been put in the middle of it. I just would, you know, I'm concerned about the kids and them being displaced by the end of June. I think there was some misinterpretation of the lease, which, you know, one of the clauses speaks about, you know, them having 540 days plus to vacate. So there's questions about that. I just hope that going forward, if the building is to be vacated on June 30th of this year, that it does not stay vacant, and that it gets populated with other students. If the school committee has other designs on it, and I understand there could be that. And even the possibility of the Waldorf School coexisting with another entity there, I think should be explored. With regard to the Board of Health's meeting on Tuesday, I just want to caution, and Mr. Starr brought up the local comprehensive plan, which was put together in 2010, and that's based on the regional policy plan put together by the Cape Cod Commission. And I understand that that was just adopted at the Assembly yesterday. So as we go forward with that plan, or actually the 2010 plan, we have to be mindful of the fact that the title of that plan is Balancing Growth, Infrastructure, and Natural Systems. And one of the parts in there is the strategy with regard to land use is to ensure that the growth does not exceed resource and infrastructure capacities, and the town will adopt a sewer neutral and nitrogen limitation policy. So I hope in your deliberation with the Board of Health, you're mindful of that, and that you take the consideration of the input from the citizens of the town of Barnstable in the local comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mark, for the report. A couple of comments. One, in talking about the PFAS levels, has there been any further communication about the Fire Academy, Barnstable Fire Academy, and whether it is planning to stay where it is, or if there's any chance?
I think there's multiple efforts going on at this point, both relevant to what will continue there, where they are in the process of complying with DEP requirements for that site, and other more regional opportunities. So the Fire Training Academy remains up gradient of our major water supply to serve Hyannis. It will always be of concern to us, and we will continue to work with them to make sure that they operate, whatever they operate there, has no or minimal impact on the water. So I speak with administrative units all the time relative to this issue, and I know they've just gone this week through another level of review with DEP. So I don't know if that answers your question. But
Thank you.
yes.
Regarding the cable license, I believe it was end of November, December, you brought forth to us information about the FCC having public comment regarding whether the license fee, is that going to have any impact on our negotiations with the cable Comcast?
I think it's a consideration in the negotiations. So, yes.
Okay, so nothing has been determined yet
No,
at the federal level?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And the last comment I wanted to make was to echo Councilor Rapcrossetti's comments about the Waldorf School. And again, I think these issues with the lease that is expiring and possibly a challenge with them being able to continue to occupy the building, I think that where we could have had a little better communication is between the occupants and the school committee in the future, because again, I think that there could be an impact on the students and the families at that school. And again, I would hope that we do have a intent to occupy that building if once the Waldorf School leaves. We have obviously another school that's mothballed, and that is not probably the direction we want to go in with that asset. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for a follow-up to both Councilor Rapcrossetti and Councilor Schnepp, leadership was invited in for a conversation on another item with the school committee, and certainly the manager, myself, and the vice president all made known our interest to keep the school open, to get a new tenant in there, and to keep it a vibrant part of our community. So we have had that discussion, just so you know. Anybody else want to speak to the, yes, Mr. VP?
Yes, just as a follow-up relative to the Waldorf School, one thing I did learn out of that conversation at our meeting this past week was that the number of Barnstable students impacted family-wise was minimal. There's only 3 students out of the entire student body that actually are from Barnstable. Not that we don't want to take care of the other 57 students from the other outlying communities, but I just want to make sure folks are aware of that it's not 60 Barnstable students that we're talking about, it's only 3. More importantly, I want to follow up on Councilor Schnepp's issue relative to the cable license. I'm very concerned that the FCC basically is trying to move forward to eliminate support for the PEG channels, the public, the education, and the government channel support. If that does occur, basically everything that we take for granted now on a regular basis on Channel 18 will, for all intents and purposes, cease to exist. Terry Duenas' operation down in Dennis, Cape Cod Media Center, will really be hamstrung, if you will, in terms of what it can provide for future programming. So I want to be sure that as we are in negotiations with Comcast, now Xfinity, that somehow, whatever happens, that we do have a source of revenue coming in, because we're going to continue to pay that tax. It's just a matter of where that tax gets allocated to after the fact. So we can supersede, I hope, in negotiations and discussion. And towards that end, could you share with us who is our outside attorney? I know a lot of cable attorneys, having been in that business for years. I'm just curious who that might be.
I'll ask Attorney Weil. Who's our attorney from, for cable?
William Solomon.
Thank you. William Solomon.
Bill Salma? Okay, I know him well. Okay, he's good. He knows the systems very well. But again, to reinforce, somehow if we can make sure that we're covered monetarily for that. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions of the manager? Thank you again. Thank you also for the effort and the deadline put on Fish and Wildlife. We certainly need to get to the bottom of that.
Yep.
We talked about that last meeting, and you presented that correctly at your meeting, so thank you for Barnstable for doing good work on that issue.
Thank you.
I would ask the council, before we take our presentation on the short-term rentals issues, to indulge me one more time with something off the agenda under old business, new business. 2019-083. I understand we may have a few more bench riders with us tonight, so I'm trying to free them up as well. Could I get the council's permission, please, to delve into, I got a first and a second. All those in favor of addressing this issue? Aye. Aye. Thank you. Opposition? Abstentions? Fine. Councilor, I should say Vice President, would you please read 2019-83?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is new business. We will refer this to a public hearing on February 7th, 2019. It is item 2019-083. It's an appropriation order in the amount of $147,725, community preservation funds for preservation and restoration of St. Mary's Episcopal Church located at 3055 Main Street, Route 6A in Barnstable in Precinct 1.
I have a first and a second to move this to a public hearing on February 7th. Any discussion? Yes?
I just want to thank the president for being considerate and making this kind of a change in our agenda to accommodate some of our good citizens, and I appreciate that you're doing that.
Thank you very much. It is hard to accommodate everyone, but if we know these items that are just a referral to the next meeting, we should try to alleviate some of the pressure in our room. But we welcome everyone to stay and enjoy these ceremonial process.
It's exciting.
Hearing no further discussion, I'm calling for 2019-083 to be moved to a public hearing February 7th, 2019. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? No. Thank you very much. I would love to call the people who have organized for our presentation on Chapter 337 of the Acts of 218, an act regulating and insuring short-term rentals, to please come forward. We're very fortunate tonight to have Ryan Castle, the CEO of the Cape and Islands Association of Realtors, property owners, for addressing the property owner's obligation portion. We are always excited to see our Director of Finance, Mark Milne. He'll summarize the key points of the act affecting municipalities and municipal action. And we're grateful to have our own Director of Planning and Development, Elizabeth Jenkins, who will discuss the local regulatory considerations. Welcome. How are you? Nice to see you. You guys have a coordinated kickoff, or you just want to let Ryan take the first bite of the apple as a guest in our chamber?
You guys asked me to come and speak about the homeowner responsibility. You asked me to come speak about the homeowner responsibility. I'll talk a little bit about that and also how some of the language used in the bill applies, hosting platforms, intermediaries, things of that nature, and how the business kind of works. So it has been a trying time in the last several weeks for homeowners, real estate brokerages, hosting platforms, to try to figure this out as it passed, signed into law December 30th, and it's for new leases that were entered into January 1st or later. And so as I get into some of that details, remember that. And so it's been trying to figure it out. DOR has only put out frequently asked questions. They have not actually codified anything in regulation and law yet. So some of it still is in a little bit of flux. We'll start with what homeowners have to do. They will have to register with the Department of Revenue. Their address will not, their actual street number will not be public in the registry. DOR does not have the registration process yet. And so you don't register yet. You will register. And intermediaries, which are real estate brokers, things like that, that are managing your property for you, would be able to register on your behalf as well. The person who collects the rent will collect the tax, and the tax is by nature supposed to be added on to the top of the rent. So it's not like comes out of the homeowner. However, as you guys all know, taxes, there's going to be a free market balancing act somewhere. So the person who collects taxes is required to collects rent is required to collect the taxes, and that person is also required to remit them to the state. So for most people that are using Airbnb, HomeAway, or a real estate brokerage, which are all kind of described as hosting platforms in the law, and intermediaries, they will be remitting them to the state just like a hotel does lodging tax, a restaurant does restaurant tax, and all that stuff. And so what lady was referring to earlier is a little bit of a confusion in the industry, because the industry does not operate generally like hotels. So rent is due on the first day of the stay. So that's where I think she was talking about a little bit of confusion on what the rates may be, because if towns change rates between the time the lease is signed and the stay starts, then that extra rent would be due based on that sort of thing. It's the way hotels operate, but hotels, you check in, you give them a credit card, that sort of thing. Short-term rentals, usually you're paying 60, 90 days in advance of the full thing. So that's a little bit of a unique thing there. If you did change rates, they take effect on the first of the next quarter. All taxes, like lodging tax, is paid to the state. Nothing's paid to the town unless you go, and I'm sure you'll talk about the community impact fee. Community impact fee would be the only thing that would be paid to the town. Insurance. This is the big one, because this is one where that's tripped a lot of people up based on the law. We finally have what we believe is clarity. The law talks about the $1 million liability policy has to be carried by the homeowner and cover the homeowner or a tenant. So that freaked a lot of people out, thinking that the short-term renter was going to have to be covered. The short-term renter in the bill is the occupant, not the tenant. Remember, this was a law that kind of encompassed Boston. So in Boston, you may have actual people renting an apartment who are renting out one room in their apartment that they're already renting. So they would be the tenant of that lease. So you don't see that traditionally on the Cape of, a year-round person renting, then short-term renting off of that. You don't see, that's not the primary part of the business. So that was a lot of confusion. Now, as said earlier, the FAIR Plan has a $500,000 liability policy, not the $1 million. We have brought that up to our legislators on that issue. Umbrella policies. Remember, umbrella policies follow the primary residence. So you need to check with your insurance agent on whether the umbrella policy will cover the short-term renter, the vacation rental unit, and if it's an umbrella policy out of state, that even complicates it further. Umbrella policies, from what I understand, and I know there's more people in the audience that know the insurance market better, are not all the same. So it's really going to be up to which one. However, the intermediary, the hosting platform, is required to tell the owner that they need to have insurance. So real estate brokers, Airbnb, HomeAway, they will be required to tell them they need insurance, and they have the option to provide it for the homeowner. There's a couple products in the market. I've actually been in talks with them on cutting special pricing for our members in the last couple weeks, where they basically add the insurance on as a booking fee to the renter, and then that covers it. It covers like the real estate broker, the owner of the property, and the renter have that $1 million liability policy. So that's an evolving marketplace that's going to be looked at for those that are kind of in this business to be providing that insurance for them. And so go from there. There's the 14-day exemption. I would say the 14-day exemption is for people that rent their house out less than 14 days in a calendar year that do not pay the income tax on it. They are not required to collect the tax. They are required to register and carry the insurance. So just to point that out. And they are required to file with the state that they're renting it out for less than 14 days. And if they rent it out for more than 14 days, they are required out of pocket to pay the tax for the first 14 days. So I want to say that's probably the hits of what the homeowner's going to be responsible for, or the intermediary, or the hosting platform as we go through this. So I'm open to questions you have, but I'll let everyone else hit it unless I miss something people think that was vital from the homeowner responsibility.
What's the council's preference here? Maybe these items are so significant to each one of these, maybe we should take them as they come from the discussion. With that in mind, Councilor Rapcorsetti?
Hi, one question, how often do they have to remit to the state? Is it quarterly?
So.
And when does that begin?
Yeah, so you don't collect any tax for stays until July 1st. So it's leases entered into January 1st or later, for stays starting July 1st or later. So you wouldn't actually have to be due, and because tax is due at the time of stay, you wouldn't actually have any taxes to actually pay up until July 1st. You might collect them 60, 90 days, 120 days, or at signing of the lease, depending on how you structure your business model as an owner or a real estate broker. But you don't actually owe it until the time of the stay. Then you have till like the 20th, I believe it's the 20th of the month after, to pay it. However, the law does say, and this is where DOR has not issued the regulations, that if you rent the house out for less than 5 months a year, which I would guess most everyone on the Cape does, they are required to reduce the administrative burdens of filing taxes. However, if you're only renting out for July and August, it's 2 payments, so I don't know how you can reduce that burden, but we'll see how that plays out in regulations.
And it's my understanding, in speaking with Mark Milne, that if you've secured the lease prior to 2019, even if they're staying, how does that affect? So if they've made their booking December 30th of 2018?
There's no tax due.
There's no tax due, even if they stay in August or September of this year.
Because it would be hard, and the reason why they did that was, remember, the original legislation they passed that the governor sent back was a November 1st lease date. But because they passed that November 1st, it's hard to go back to consumers if you told them what the price is going to be.
Okay. All right, right now, that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilors? Yes. Councilor Snep? Go to the
Thank
end,
you.
work our way back.
Thank you for that very clear presentation. So the homeowner has to register with DOR. Is there any requirement for an inspection of the unit by the town, or is that going to be covered by Elizabeth?
The bill leaves it up to the town.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilor Collin?
Hi, yeah, I have a couple of questions. I mean, I see this as an ever-changing mandate, really. But I wondered if there's going to be any way to pay the taxes at the point it's booked on Airbnb, if they've thought about that sort of an idea of linking to, I mean, is this a Massachusetts state thing only? Are we national with it? So then there's a way to satisfy that tax regulation.
So I will clarify this. So 46 other states have the tax. A lot of the states do not require the hosting platform to remit it. Most of the best practice around the country is that they are remitting it, because it's just a service that the real estate broker or Airbnb ends up providing. I would caution to use Airbnb as an example in this. Airbnb is such a small market on the Cape of this thing. HomeAway and Real Estate Brokers Direct are by far the largest. There may be such a small market share. But however, most real estate brokers, HomeAway, everyone else, a lot of them have that technology. They're adding it on. When you get the lease from a real estate broker or online, you'll see it. It'll have the tax added in there now, yes. But you'll pay it, but sometimes it's deposits due, sometimes it's everything else. Usually it's 30, 60, 90 days, full payments due, and that's by that point all the lease will be collected. But it's the time, but the law is the time of stay, the tax rate at the time of stay.
I have one follow-up.
Yes,
if I may.
follow-up,
It just seems to me that from a consumer's standpoint and from the homeowner's standpoint, that being able to have a third party remit that takes a lot of the sting out of the entire thing, because you have your rental price, it's tacked on at the end, people either want it or they don't, and it takes a lot of the management out of their hands. But I also have a question about mortgages and whether, that will be earmarked in mortgages going forward if you plan on having your, there's just all these boxes to check now with regard to insurance and enforcement, and I would assume mortgages if you're going to be renting your home out for 8 weeks. I just wondered if you'd heard anything.
Traditionally, because this has been a thing on the Cape, most of those mortgages would have had to qualify under that anyways, because most people rent them out. Now, however, if you're saying because it's more known, because you're registering, I can't speak to those that didn't tell anyone that they were doing it,
Yes, Mr. VP?
Thank you, Mr. President. Ryan, great presentation. Thank you. Just a quick question. I'm just curious, technically, if anyone backdates, as opposed to going through Airbnb or one of the others that are online, if it's, a local person, that's been renting to the same person for, years, as long as they backdate to December 31st, technically, they don't have to pay anything, correct?
I would.
You really can't be saying that, Mr. Vice President.
I can, but I'm just, but some people might.
That would be wrong, Mr. President.
I understand it would be wrong, but this is what,
Nobody will support you when it's wrong. That's wrong.
where I'm going with this is, how do you enforce this?
For the first year, this spurred early renters.
Okay.
This spurred early leases.
Okay.
I know real estate brokers who got a lot signed in November, December, when they traditionally would have got them signed in January and February.
Okay. That was really where I was going with this.
Because with that lease signing did not come a responsibility of any payments of sort. It just said contracts entered into.
Okay. And through the DOR, if someone is not using one of the traditional kinds of online programs, how is that enforced?
Not sure.
Okay.
You have to ask DOR.
So I see a new division of DOR rental police probably being formed. Okay, thank you.
Most of the time, in my experience, when I've dealt with short-term rentals around the country, is neighbors usually rat you out.
Boy, we're not speaking well of our community tonight, so. We got rats, we get backdaters, we got everything. So I don't believe any of those people live around any of us, so we don't have that problem. But,
I'm talking real world.
may I have any other questions? I have a few myself. Thank you, Ryan, for coming in tonight. Ryan is a very busy guy off Cape today, came down and come back and be with us tonight and try to help clarify this. We also know that we may not have all the answers and that the world may turn here, so we may invite Ryan and DOR and others back again for further clarification on this. Ryan, some of the issues that, as you know, I am in the trade of business as well. I own Wiana Realty in Osterville, and so we have had a history of renting. I'm not sure we're going to much more, but we've had a history of renting, and we've had these issues. Some of the issues you brought up need just a little bit of tightening, perhaps, because of the trade and because we may have some trade people watching us, if I could ask. One thing you said was the person collecting tax needs to remit it to the state. The tax is the question of what is taxable. When we, thank you. When we do the business, what we have had a history of is putting aside a cleaning deposit, things like that. We've had 50% down at the signing, and it's very usual to sign in November, December, and January for the upcoming year. Nobody's sneaking anything at that pace. But that money usually goes right to the homeowner, the check's made to the homeowner, and we're sitting with maybe the cleaning fees or things like that. So in that case.
The tax by law is total consideration paid by the occupant for the stay. And that includes any, and we don't dispute it, any service fees, any cleaning fees, or other charges. Because, let's say, you could make rent $100, make $1,000 booking fee, and do that, right? So it's total consideration paid by occupant for that stay. However, Department of Revenue last week amended their frequently asked questions to include refundable security deposits being taxed. We dispute that that is for consideration of the stay. We are challenging them on it, but we are advising our members to collect it on refundable security deposits for now at the stay. And Department of Revenue claims, well, if you refund the security deposit, you'll refund the tax too. And the 20-day deadline doesn't necessarily work for the way the days stay, the sorts of things. This is one of those things where it's really different than hotels. So the refundable security deposit is really where a lot of things are, but cleaning fees, anything that's consideration of stay, I think it's where some optional things are too, is where some of that is with Department of Revenue is going to have to be clarified. There's a lot of optional things within a stay too that we'll have to have continuing conversations with the Department of Revenue. Like I said, they've just issued frequently asked questions. These are not regulations.
Again, a perfect example why I'm sure we'll be seeing you again before the season starts. Another issue on that remitting of taxes, if the professional office, so the realtor or somebody takes the deposit and chooses to remit the tax as the collector of all the fees, and because they go through an escrow and send off money, that particular individual may not have the actual property address. So is there going to be accommodations for agents with their address as well as accompaniment of where the funds went against which particular
So
street
we're not
address?
sure. Department of Revenue, obviously, with a hotel, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, same
When you
place.
remit tax to a hotel, you know where the hotel is, right? How you remit it to the Department of Revenue, if, for example, you're ABC Real Estate Company and you have 300 rentals in 6 towns and you send your money up, how do they know which town it goes back to? Those are the kinds of things to kind of figure out because the person submitting it up is not at that fixed location of that town. So those are the things that I think DOR probably, in my mind, is probably trying to figure out on their technology end.
Another case in point where we'll have you back because we know some of our bigger rental offices do multiple town services, so that could be an issue.
And one more clarification.
Certainly.
Short-term rentals is 31 days or less in the law. So if the stay is longer than 31 days, there is no tax collected. And they are also not required with the insurance, and they're not required to register if it's more than 31 days.
So you're actually hitting on a very solid point that I was hoping to also take one step further. And when you say 14 days, it's a period of time collected over the year that equals greater than 14 days.
Yes, it's to mirror the federal income tax law.
But if it equals greater than 31 days, do they not?
If the consecutive stay is longer than 31, we know we have
Yes.
people that come down for 40. The 14 day is not a consecutive stay. It's 14 different days throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
If someone comes down and rents for 45 days at one house with one lease, there's no tax collected. There's no insurance requirement. There's no registration requirement under this law.
And so the 14 days, say for instance, I lease my property 3 one-week periods, June, 1 week in June, 1 week in July, 1 week in August.
Be more than 14 days.
Yes,
Yes.
but not until I get to the final payment of the 3rd month.
No, that's where you have to file an affidavit with the state that says you are only renting out for less than 14 days. You're still required to have the insurance and register. And you as the homeowner, if you rent out for more than 14 days, are required to pay the taxes yourself if you go over the 14-day limit.
And the last thing is about the insurance. If they fail to get the insurance, they're supposed to not conclude the contract to lease.
I would think so. I mean, they're not in
It's
compliance
an
with the law.
obligation
Yeah.
to lease in this case.
Yes.
Yes. So there's a few points of clarification.
Yeah, and
I
that
think.
31 days, I think that probably Elizabeth's going to talk about that, probably doesn't match with your local short-term rental definition. I'm not sure. Most towns do not have 31 days. It's usually 28 or 90 or something else in between, so.
Okay. Okay, well, that's my short list. Anyone else? Hearing none, I'll be on to our Director of Finance, Mark Milne. Thank you, Mark.
Good evening, everybody. Mark Milne, Director of Finance, and just to reiterate what Ryan stated, the Department of Revenue is in process of developing technical information guidelines on this law, and we expect those to be out in several weeks. We were at a meeting last week, and they said that the registry is expected to be up and running sometime in March, along with those technical guidelines. So this is an evolving law. The guidelines are evolving, and as they do evolve, we'll keep the council informed as to what we hear. Talking a little bit, going into the municipalities and the effects on the local cities and towns and how this affects us. First, I want to talk about the excise tax application. The Act automatically applies that state excise tax, the local excise tax, and a new excise tax for the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund to existing lodging establishments. Those are all our hotels, motels, B&Bs, lodging houses that currently are subject to those taxes. The Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, they are now subject to that tax as well. In addition, short-term rentals rented in excess of 14 days in a calendar year, as Ryan stated, are now added to that group of affected establishments under this law. So here's a look at how those taxes are going to be applied. The major changes associated with this law are in red. Under the affected establishments, the new group of establishments that these taxes apply to are those short-term rentals greater than 14 days in a calendar year. The Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund, that new tax of 2.75% will be applied to all 5 of those types of establishments going forward. And that new fund for the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund will be managed on the Commonwealth's record-keeping system. All those taxes will be remitted by the operators to the Commonwealth on a monthly basis, starting with the first payment in August. August 20th of 2019 will be the first payment that operators will have to make to the state. And those taxes, both the state tax, the local tax, and the new trust fund tax, all have to be collected by the operators and remitted to the state. None of that comes to the town directly. Then on a quarterly basis, the state will return those taxes back to the town for the local tax share only. The state tax of 5.7% goes to the state's general fund, and the local tax of 6%, 4% of it goes to the town's general fund, and 2% of it goes to our comprehensive water management and private way fund that we created several years ago through special legislation. And then the remaining 2.75% will go to that new fund, again, managed by a governing board that I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But that'll be the records will be maintained on the Commonwealth's record-keeping system. That money will not come directly to the town. There are a number of exemptions listed below. Tenancies at will, month-to-month leases, for example, timeshares, employees of the U.S. military traveling, staying in short-term rentals while traveling on official orders, and so forth. So there's a number of exemptions provided in the law. And everybody's going to ask me what's the estimated revenue from this. This is the big question everybody wants to know. If we take our fiscal year 2018 rooms tax that we generated, it was almost $3 million. If we use that for a base estimate for 2020, the 2.75% new tax for the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund would be almost $1.4 million that would go into that fund based on that level of sales. Some numbers have been provided during the deliberations of the special legislation as it was being created. These numbers were not generated by the town of Barnstable, but they have been floated around and used when debating the legislation. And it is estimated that the short-term rental impact will generate an additional $1.2 million, almost $1.2 million for the town's general fund, $590,000 for the Cape and Islands, or for our comprehensive water Management and Private Way Fund, and then another $815,000 for the new trust fund. So that's the estimated impact. However, those numbers were also calculated before the final passage of the legislation, which included that 14-day exemption. And so I think these numbers are high, and I would view them with a little skepticism, and we're really going to need that registry to be up and running with some data supporting what the activity levels in this category are going to be. And we're going to probably need a year's worth of data to see what that is. An optional community impact fee. Highlighted in red here are some actions that the council could take. Under this law, these are some of the actions that the council can take. This is an optional fee. Requires the town council to approve and impose, and it applies to two categories of short-term rentals only. Any professionally managed unit defined as one or more short-term rental unit in the same town, not located within a single or two or three family dwelling that includes the operator's primary residence. That's one category. You can vote to apply the community impact fee to that category of short-term rentals. The second category, which you would implement through a separate vote, would be to apply that fee to each transfer of occupancy of a short-term rental unit that's located within a two or three family dwelling that includes the operator's primary residence. So those are local actions that the council could consider taking. Not required, just they're optional. If you do adopt them, not less than 35% of the revenue generated by those activities must be dedicated to an affordable housing projects or local infrastructure projects. The remainder of the revenue would become general fund revenue. The Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund is a fund that, in addition to those taxes that are generated from short-term rentals, may receive appropriations from the Commonwealth, and it will retain any investment income they earn on their deposits. According to the Mass Department of Environmental Protection and the Cape Cod Commission, all Barnstable County towns are part of this fund automatically, as we are all subject to the Cape Cod Commission's Area-wide 208 plan. Projects eligible for subsidies may include projects that utilize innovative strategies and alternative septic system technologies that result in any nutrient reduction in our estuaries. The fund may provide subsidies and other assistance to debt incurred prior to the establishment of the fund in certain towns, as listed here, and Barnstable is one of them. So if we had a project that would qualify under this trust fund, for which we incurred debt prior to its creation, we could receive a subsidy from the trust fund for that project's debt service. And a municipality may withdraw from this fund with a two-thirds vote of the legislative body. However, it won't become effective until March 28th, 2020, 1 year after the effective implementation date of this new act. So we're in the fund for at least 1 year. The board, Cape Cod Islands, this legislation creates a new board called the Cape and Islands Water Protection Board. This is another action highlighted in red here that the town council must take. This one you must take. The board's going to consist of one person to be appointed by the town council, and each municipality that's a member of the fund, and it shall be a member of the town council, the town manager, or any member of the professional staff of the town of Barnstable. Can't be a volunteer. This board approves the disbursements from the trust, and they may direct up to 10% of the annual revenue of the trust to contract with a regional planning agency, institution of higher education, nonprofit corporation, to evaluate any and to report on any adaptive management measures and reduce nitrogen pollution and so forth, as stated here. It's limited to 10% of the revenue that the trust generates. In addition, the executive director of the Cape Cod Commission and Martha's Vineyard Commission and town manager of Nantucket serve as non-voting members of the board. Those two commissions may provide technical assistance to the board, and they may be compensated by a vote of the board. And board members will serve for 3-year terms. And the duties of the board are limited to determining the method for subsidy allocation, including the equitable distribution among participating municipalities consistent with the revenue deposited from each municipality into the fund. So my interpretation of that language is what gets generated in the town of Barnstable must come back to the town of Barnstable. But we have no guidance yet from the Department of Revenue as to whether or not that's fact. But when you read the language in the law, it sounds pretty clear that that's the intent of it, but we're waiting to see. And I think that concludes my comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilors? Councilor Smith?
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. On the chart in which you illustrate the taxes that are, the breakdown of the taxes that are going to be paid, and it shows the existing lodging, I think it's back a little farther, and it shows the split of the 4% to general fund and 2% to the, what we've designated as the waste, or the water management and private road. I realize that allocation is based on our existing local tax structure for excise, those categories. Do we have the choice to change the allocation for short-term rentals if we wanted to?
Through special legislation, I believe we could try to do that, but we can't do it here locally.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Collin?
Sorry, I might be repeating the same question, but, so the town can kick around a couple of different numbers in this whole thing, right? We haven't yet decided if we're gonna do the community impact tax. But as far as the local tax is concerned, I had read that it could either be 2%, 4%, or 6%. So is what you just said to Councilor Schnepp that we chose 6 because we already have hotels and B&Bs at that level?
Yes, we have to apply the local tax of 6% because that's what we already have.
Okay.
One thing I would like to add though is that local tax level of 6%, the council can change that. You could elect to reduce it if you wanted to, but 6% is as high as you could go.
But one quick point on that, because I get this question a lot. If you change it, it cannot just be for short-term rentals.
Right, it has to be
It's for
blanket.
hotels, it's for everything.
Right.
So that was to your point. I don't believe y'all can change the allocation just for short-term rentals with special legislation. You have to change the allocation of all lodging tax.
So then, if you could go forward to your next slide of the projected amount that the town would put in the coffers. Okay, so on this slide, when you look at the fiscal year 2020 short-term rental impact, I still am vexed a little bit by how we're going to get compliance on this if it starts mid-year and how it's enforced. And so I think these numbers are very high for the first few years until we start hearing from banks and insurance companies that no, we're not going to insure, and no, we're not going to do that until you have this signed and you need this affidavit and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I don't, thank you.
I agree with you.
Perhaps Ryan could talk about the penalties if there is.
I disagree.
Yeah. Please take the mic.
The more I have found, and now maybe for the first year for compliance, but I honestly believe from the more and more I've talked to businesses, real estate brokers about how much they're doing alone, I think those numbers are small or underestimating once you get this up and running. I may be wrong, but I mean, just some of the real estate brokers have told me their revenues and the taxes they would pay. I mean, you have real estate brokers on the Cape who will collect well over $1 million in one brokerage in tax.
If I may, yes, and I'm sure real estate brokers handle a lot of the rentals on Cape Cod, but for the people who are doing Airbnb, if there's no platform when that's going to deliver the taxes to the DOR, it's going to be skirted for a few years until they're busted.
Airbnb has to deliver it. They're collecting the rent.
So that's what I'm saying. So when I asked before about the payment and submission of taxes via a website, that would be much easier to enforce. And you had said that in some other states they do that. Yeah, okay, that's what I meant.
In this state, that's mandated. In other states, it was optional.
Okay, thank you.
That's where I was going with that.
Oh, thank you. That makes it clearer.
Councilors, yes. Jessica, Rep. Cassetti.
Thank you, Mark. For the public here in Barnstable, are you going to have this up on the website, our own FAQ, so that we can direct homeowners to the site? And I think it'll probably be changing, or especially if the council decides to adopt their own tax on top of that. So will you have that?
Yes, that's a wonderful suggestion. We will. We can create a link to the DOR's frequently asked questions as well, and we can provide our own local information.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
We've had discussions about trying to disseminate as much information as possible without overstepping our bounds as far as being counselors on finances and things of that. But you're absolutely right. Whatever we can disseminate would certainly help our constituent base. Anybody else? Councilor Snepp?
Thank you. Is there any time frame in which the council can make a determination to add a community impact tax? I know that that probably will not be something we rush to do, but it is a consideration. I know that the Housing Assistance Corporation just recently published a report on the effect of the short-term rental market on the availability of year-round rentals, and it may be something we want to take into consideration at some point in the future. Is there any time frame in which we have to make that decision?
No.
Thank you. As leadership, it would be my hope that it comes forward prior to the season. If it's not an acceptable tax at that time, is that ever up for reconsideration?
Yes, you could always revoke a tax after implementation.
Okay, so we understand we probably will address it so everybody knows that Barnstable's on top of their game and has stepped up and had a position on it, but it is something we can also revisit after we see the success of the whole process. Anybody else have any questions? I have one for Mark myself. Mark, on the 10% going into the revenue trust, we I've seen projections that we will provide the biggest amount of income into that trust, but we are still only getting a 1/15 or 1/14 vote on that panel. Is that what we're saying?
That's correct.
So there is no weighted vote for us, even though we have more money in the trust than everybody else. And then if there is a vote by those that isn't weighted, and they vote to pay more fees to others than we vote for, we have more money in the tank, so we have more fees, more money coming out of our fees. Am I correct?
Yes, if 10% of the total revenue
Right.
can come out and go to those to support technical type of services, most of it will be from the two big participants in this fund, which is Barnstable and Yarmouth.
Yes. So we could have as much as 50% of what's in the tank. The other 15, the vote of the 15 could decide to give 10% to a terrific cause that they believe in, and we may lose 10% of our 50% because we only have one of the 15 votes.
Correct.
Okay, so we see how we're being treated in this process, I hope. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Vice President.
In order to make that a weighted vote, there would have to be special legislation filed, I would assume, and they would have to go through the legislative process. That's something we might want to consider with our delegation to see if we can make that happen.
Any other questions? On to the last phase. Please, our Director of Planning and Development, Elizabeth Jenkins.
Good evening, councilors. Elizabeth Jenkins, Director of Planning and Development. And as we've heard tonight, vacation rentals have always been a part of our seasonal community here in Barnstable, but online marketplaces, the Airbnb, the HomeAway, have really changed the nature of what that industry looks like on Cape Cod. And now, thanks to this new legislation, it's an industry that is regulated and taxed in the state of Massachusetts. And under the new legislation there, it establishes sort of 4 ways in which municipalities can regulate short-term rentals. Can regulate their existence and location, licensing and registration, options to license and register the short-term rentals. We can ask for a demonstration that there are no outstanding violations on the property, and it allows us to conduct health and safety inspections. So again, not a lot of specifics in the legislation itself, but it does outline the parameters now in which municipalities can regulate short-term rentals, and these are the 4 categories. So how does that translate down into our sort of local approach to tracking and regulating short-term rentals? I think probably in these following ways. The first one being looking at our zoning. We really need to modernize our zoning to reflect this new use, this new short-term rental use. Currently, as Ryan alluded, we have no definition of what is a short-term rental in our zoning ordinance. So we really need to look at how and when do we distinguish between your casual host, your commercial host, and think about the fact that Barnstable, we are a big and diverse community with areas of different character and that are served by different levels of infrastructure. Next, we need to think about how we can apply our health and safety regulations, building, fire, and health codes, again, to protect the safety of our residents and the renters here in the town of Barnstable. We also need to look at, evaluate other existing regulations that are on the books, and again, how they relate to this changing marketplace. I think there are sort of 2 key things that we need to keep in mind as we go through this process. I think we need to make sure whatever regulations we put in place are enforceable, easily enforceable. You can see that there are sort of already a set of challenges that those renting their homes and those who are renters within our community are going to be up against in complying with these new regulations. So I think both internally for our staff, we need to think about what the impacts of regulating these short-term rentals are on the staff of the town of Barnstable, again, as well as our community and our renters. And I think we need to make sure that whatever we adopt can be clearly communicated with our residents. There needs to be frankly, a bright line between what running a commercial business out of your home looks like and what renting your home on one of these short-term rental platforms looks like. And so to get there, to essentially answer the questions, where do we want to go and how do we get there, we have an item proposed tonight, 2019-079, requesting $50,000 to fund a qualified consultant to help us answer these questions, to do outreach to our community, to evaluate, again, the regulations that we feel are appropriate, and to draft regulations and an outreach and compliance strategy pertaining to short-term rentals. I'll note I am your spokesperson tonight, but this would be certainly a joint effort in cooperation with our Building and Regulatory Services Department. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councilors, any questions? Yes, Councilor Rep. Grissetti.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That too, I think, let me ask you, currently, if you rent your home, or if you rent a room in your home, it has to be registered with the town, and it's inspected by the Board of Health, and you pay a $90 annual fee to do that?
That's correct. We do have rental registration requirement that requires any dwelling unit that is rented to be registered with the Board of Health.
And is it inspected once a year? Is it or
an annual process for registration and inspection?
Okay, and what do you mean by qualified consultant? What do you envision a qualified consultant from what field?
So I really envision this in sort of 3 parts. One, I think there's a community outreach component. I think this is a sort of a community issue, one that we need to take the temperature in. Frankly, we have 14 different residential zoning districts today in the town of Barnstable, and they each sort of have their own nature and character. So I think really getting a overall picture of what our community values are in terms of short-term rentals is important. So I think community outreach is the first one. I think the second component is drafting regulations. Again, for short-term rentals, a lot of different variables that could potentially go into this if we choose to regulate short-term rentals. Things like minimum durations, maximum occupancy, someone to sort of lay out what these variables are and help us pick what the correct ones are for our community. The third one being recommendations on, again, how to manage the the registration and the regulation of these short-term rentals going forward. So I see this effort in 3 parts.
So currently, if I may, Mr. President, currently, the Board of Health has that burden to do the inspection and to register. That's under the Board of Health's jurisdiction, is it?
That's correct. One would anticipate if now we have this registry that the volume of those rental registrations would likely increase if now there's the ability to track and enforce all of those registrations. So we're going to have to be able to respond to that change in volume.
Okay, thank you.
Councilors? Yes.
Could you confirm that all of this is voluntary on our part, the town? That we could go forth and not do any local regulations?
Well, we have local regulations now, again, to register rentals. We have some zoning on the books regarding renting your dwelling. And so it's not that we're not regulating it now. I think one of certainly my concerns is what's permitted and what's not permitted is not always clear for residents. So I do think that's an issue we need to address.
Okay. And just to
Certainly, Councilor Snow.
expand off of Councilor Replicasetti on the consultant that you're going to be proposing later on in the agenda. Given that there are 15 towns that are also going to be looking at this issue, has there been any consideration for any regional approach to looking at some of these issues? Or is the need to hit the ground running sort of putting that off?
Again, the primary reason for bringing the item forward is to address the timeliness issue. These gentlemen have stated, these regulations are already starting to impact people's decision. Barnstable is obviously the largest town, the one where we expect to have the most impact, and one that again, we think that we should play a leading role in being proactive about thinking how to best regulate.
Could I just get a point of clarification? When you said we could not take any action on some of these things, by law, the short-term law that was passed requires us to vote on certain things, but you're right about revisiting our zoning. That's completely up to us. But yes, Councilor Collins.
Yes, I guess I would ask that with the rollout of the new website, which is fantastic, that we have a very easy way for people to register their homes, and as Councilor Replicasetti said, get some answers for frequently asked questions like, what exactly is the Water Protection Fund? And what happens if I don't register? And just some different parameters for the average citizen to just look up and see what their options are, where the money's going, answering questions like, why 6%? Because the hotels and B&Bs, so it doesn't look, so that all the information is out there, and it's not like we're randomly selecting 6% to kill Airbnb people or whatever. I mean, because I know that that's how it feels. I've heard from a lot of constituents that were very angry, thinking that we just arbitrarily pulled 6% out of the air, and it's important that they know that that's not the case. And then also I would ask that we are really transparent about how we plan on enforcing this. Because for however many years people have been doing it one way, and the change is always causes a lot of angst, even though the benefit to Barnstable is really a benefit to all the citizens, especially with regard to the water protection thing. So I just would ask that. Thank you.
I think a short-term rental resource page is an excellent suggestion and one that we can work on immediately. And I agree, as we sort of roll out a regulatory scheme around this, making sure it's very easy to use and affordable, I think will be advantages to promoting compliance.
Any other councilors? Well, I would ask one favor, if I may, of Ryan. Again, thank you for taking the time to join us today. The town of Barnstable and this council here believes that we need to stay in our lane, so we're never really here to advise anybody on their legal contracts with their trade associates, whether it's a realtor or whether it's a platform. I know the Cape Cod and Islands Association has been very good to the consumer. Could you suggest how consumer issues should come forward, or how you'd like to see them come to your board if that's the case, or through the agents, or how would you like? Well, the process at the Board of Realtors is that if a consumer has a complaint, they can file with the board, and well, you'll take a proactive approach also. So if somebody had a question about, gee, I'm thinking of hiring a Realtor, and I've had 2 or 3 different stories about the tax. Can I reach out for you for clarity? Could you get the mic? Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
so since December 31st, my email and my phone calls from the public, from real estate brokers, from even real estate brokers that aren't members of the Association of Realtors have been nonstop. So that's all I've been doing for the last couple weeks, to the chagrin of other things I need to be worried about as well.
Yeah, so anyone in our community can reach out for Ryan and Ryan's association for that. Thank you very much, Ryan. That was a setup, but thank you. Excuse me one moment. I do see our manager. Please, would you like to come forward with the discussion?
Yes, good evening, Mark Ellis, Town Manager. Just for the sake of the council and the public, we have had many questions as well on this. Director Milne and Assistant Town Manager Clyburn had gone to the town managers meeting where DOR attended to address this. There was a lively discussion, and I think that DOR tried to explain where they were in this process of administering this, but there are many questions that remain in moving forward with this. So to the question of posting information on the website, we'll be very careful to qualify it that this is developing information. And certainly many of the areas of responsibility fall outside of us here at the town of Barnstable. So we'll be clear on that, but certainly try to provide links and the best information available. Secondly, we did invite DOR this evening, but what they've decided is to wait a little bit and make themselves available to communities after. And actually, they referenced tomorrow is Mass Municipal Association. They will be there. They will have a booth there answering questions all day long. And I believe they're scheduled for a presentation in the afternoon tomorrow. So if you, any and all who attend that conference, they will be there. But we do intend to invite DOR here for further clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan, if I may, would you be comfortable for us to also put your contact info, the general office contact information in our website? Thank you very much. You got to get something out of the guy. He gets all the way up there. Right? Thank you very much.
Get what you wish for.
We'll give him a moment to clear. Mr. Vice President, I'd ask for action on the minutes of January 3rd, 2019.
Yes, a motion to approve those minutes.
As drafted. I have a first and a second. All those in favor, that's okay, Councilor Snap. Councilor Snap's recording, yes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. My dear councilors, communications from elected officials, boards, committees, staff commissions, reports, correspondence and announcements, please. Yes, we'll start down the end, work our way back.
On January 26th, it will be the Marston's Mills Village Association Ham and Bean Supper. It is a lively event, and it's actually very well attended every year, and the monies that are raised go to our scholarship fund for our seniors that live in Marston's Mills. Doesn't matter what school they attend necessarily, but they are a resident of Marston's Mills. Last year, I believe we gave out 4 $1,000 scholarships. Always the goal to do more. I believe one of the scholarships is going to be designed to be named after Sergeant Gannon this year, and moving forward every year thereafter. So again, the Marston's Mills Village Association Ham and Bean Supper starts at 4 o'clock, January 26th. And come one, come all. I believe it goes till 7 o'clock, 7:30, 6, 4 to 6. And the cost is, last year it was $10, so hopefully it stays maybe 12. Feel free to spend more and tip graciously. So all goes to a good cause. Thank you so much. Oh, location, thank you, Council Flores. That is at Liberty Hall in downtown Marston's Mills. Thank you.
The bustling downtown. Counselor Biedenbender, please.
Thank you, President Crocker. Yesterday evening, I had the privilege to attend the opening ceremony of the Centerville Public Library's 150th anniversary year. And I was joined by Town Manager Mark Ells, as well as State Representative Will Crocker. And it was a ribbon-cutting event. To wit, I thank our town manager for mentoring me on how to do that properly. But it was a wonderful event. It's quite an impressive legacy that library has. It's actually older than the New York Public Library by 40 years. The Centerville Public Library Association began in 1869, I believe. And there was a period of time where they first stored the books at the 1856 Country Store. There were 300 books that sat on the shelves, and they were rented out on Saturdays by volunteers. And over the years, that library has grown to be an incredibly robust center of life for the village. So it was really wonderful to participate in that. And the upcoming year is going to be filled with a number of events and celebrations around that. So you will be hearing from me again on that. But thank you again to our town manager for attending.
Thank you, Councilor Biedenbender. Coming down this way, any further? Starting on the other end. All set? Yes, Councilor Snepp.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am currently serving as the liaison to the Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee. And on Monday, I presented our strategic plan to the committee. And we went through all of our priorities. And one of the things that came up in our discussion is, I believe at this year's strategic planning meeting, we did commit to doing at least semi-annual review of our strategic plan, and hard to believe that's coming up fairly soon. So I just wanted to sort of request that at some future meeting that we spend a little bit of time reviewing where we are with our strategic plan.
Thank you, so noted. Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a invitation to the public as a member of the Cape Cod Community College Board of Trustees. We're having a special event on Sunday, this coming Sunday, January 20th, from 3 to 5 p.m. We're going to be taking part in a community celebration recognizing the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, and obviously want to invite folks. The event is entitled Beloved Community. It's going to be held at the Federated Church of Hyannis at 320 Main Street. And it's going to celebrate Dr. King's life through the lens of our own community. And I'm particularly happy to announce that a good friend of mine, Dr. John Sylvanus Wilson, he's the former president of Morehouse College, which was also Dr. King's alma mater. And he was head of the President Obama's White House initiative on HBCUs, which is historical black colleges and universities. He's going to be the keynote speaker. John and I have been colleagues in the world of education for a number of years. He's an excellent speaker, a good person, and I would encourage everyone who might be able to join us and recognize the incredible and inspirational life of Dr. King this coming Sunday from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Federated Church in Hyannis. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Hebert, Councilor Hebert.
Thank you very much. Last Friday, we were pleased, I was not there, but we did have the groundbreaking ceremony for the new Voc Tech, and the plans are exciting and everything's going well on that, so I just want to make sure we know about that. And then it was pointed out to me this evening, a proud parent, that these pictures that are all around the walls and also in the Selectmen's conference room are from our 8th grade students. So they're all students from town of Barnstable. And so just take a minute to look at some of them, rather outstanding from an artistic point of view. So I just want to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rapkasani.
If I may, Councilor Hebert reminded me that we should remember Ann Williams, who was the representative for the town of Barnstable to the Cape Cod Tech. And I believe she was remembered at the groundbreaking, and she was quite a force in the town of Barnstable, and I think we should all remember her.
I To echo your sentiment, I have to tell you, I participated with the manager, Lenny Gobil, and a few people. We went over and visited her when she was sick, and the town had prepared a beautiful proclamation. And I get tired reading it because she had so many accomplishments. It was really stunning how much time she spent in our community and all the good works that she participated in. So thank you to the family, and God rest your soul. Councilor Wallace.
Thank you. At the 1717 Meeting House on Friday, January 25th at 7 p.m., there's the Scottish Delight, the third annual Robert Burns Night. And we'll have ranting and roaring and revel and lots of bagpipes and readings, and it's going to be a real fun time and interesting and all things Scottish. So if you'd like to come down and join us, we'd like to see a donation of about $15, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun. So we're looking forward to having you there. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Wallace, will you be serving the traditional plate of haggis?
Haggis will be served.
Thank you. You want to get your mic, please? I would be remiss if I didn't thank Lynn Poyant for preparing the proclamation and the work with Ann Williamses too. Thank you very much. That was very stirring for the family and for all of us who participated. Anything else, my fellow councilors? Hearing none, I would ask your permission to go forward with the orders of the day. I have it moved and seconded to proceed with the orders of the day. Under old business, I'm at 219-064. I would go down to the end and ask Councilor Hebert to please call that in, and I would note that we do have our Director of Planning and Development, and I do notice a barrister for the client as well, who had asked to at least come forward in case there are any questions. Councilor Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Item number 2019-064, amend zoning ordinance, Article 3, District Regulations, Section 240-39K, signs in the shopping center redevelopment overlay district, SCROD, public hearing, and this would be a roll call, 2/3 vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And under the rationale, please.
Good evening again. Elizabeth Jenkins, Planning and Development. This item is a proposed amendment to the text of the ordinance to revise the sign regulations that pertain to the shopping center redevelopment overlay district. This is an overlay district that is applicable specifically to the Cape Cod Mall property only. This is an effort that's been done in cooperation with Simon to look at the sign regulations that apply on this property to better support tenant changes that are happening in the mall. I will note that this request was brought forward again at the suggestion of the Zoning Board of Appeals, who sort of tasked and challenged us instead of looking at this the signs here in a piecemeal fashion and approaching it through variances to come up with a comprehensive solution to this. I will also note that this effort is supported by the Planning Board, who on Monday unanimously voted to recommend this to the council. So if it's okay with the council, Attorney Ford asked if he could make a brief presentation on this on behalf of Simon.
I would just open the public hearing first, and I'd ask Attorney Ford to join us and answer any councilor questions we may have. With that in mind, I'd open the public hearing. Any public wish to speak on this issue? Hearing none, I'd take a vote to close the public hearing process, please. I have a moved and seconded. All those in favor of closing the public hearing? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Councilor Ford.
Thank you, President Crocker, members of the council, ladies and gentlemen. Mike Ford, attorney for Simon Companies, the owners of the mall. Just very quickly, by way of background and how we've gotten to this point. The mall, as you know, was constructed in '68. It went through its last redevelopment in 1998. There's approximately 950,000 square feet of retail at the mall. And I'm sure you're all aware, the mall has been working diligently over the last year to replace the area that is being vacated by Sears' closing. And so in the course of that, The mall has signed a lease to bring in Target. They're working with another anchor and are close to being able to announce a lease for that space. But they've also been in negotiation with a number of their smaller tenants who they are moving within the mall proper. And so I think what you've seen as part of the handout is a facade that's going to be created in the westerly end of the mall, heading down towards the food court. As they began to look at the small shops, I'll call it, the small shop section, and started negotiations with various tenants for that area, it became clear that there was a need for additional wall signage for those tenants. It was a key interest of each tenant in getting them to stay and in getting new ones to come in for that particular area. So currently, the mall is governed by the SCROD, Shopping Center Redevelopment Overlay Bylaw. It's unique just to the mall area. There's an underlying zone, a business zone, a highway business zone, and also another overlay district, a groundwater protection district. Within the confines of the SCROD is their own sign code. That sign code limits the number of wall signs for the entire mall to 15. And when we put together the SCROD district, I happen to have been involved in the zoning that created the SCROD in 1998. It was a different retail mix then. There were several big, large anchors, and then a number of smaller stores, and most of the smaller stores were on the interior of the mall itself. That situation has changed. The tenant mix has changed. All of you know what's happened in retail and in online shopping. And so, frankly, the mall has got to try and react to these new market conditions in order to stay viable. I'm pleased to report that things are going well in terms of leasing, but having additional wall signage, and particularly over exterior entryways for some of these smaller tenants, has become critical to making the leases with them. So, as Elizabeth indicated, back in May of this year, I appeared before the Zoning Board of Appeals. And with respect to the modification of the mall's special permit, they have a special permit that governs the entire mall. They have a development of regional impact permit that also governs the mall. We went to make changes for Target, and I sought a variance for 2 additional wall signs. And felt that I made an argument that met the provisions of the variance criteria of the statute. And the Board of Appeals agreed and granted 2 variances, 2 additional wall signs for the Target modification. But in the course of it, the Board of Appeals asked me whether we were going to need additional wall signs. I said we were, the way the tenant things were going. They said to me, we think it should be legislatively done. We don't think you should be coming in here for variances, and encouraged me, and in fact asked them all to commit, in the event that they granted the 2 variances for that initial step, to work with town staff and come up with a legislative solution to this issue. I'm pleased to say that the mall has been able to work constructively with Elizabeth and her staff over the last 6 months. That's what's before you now. We took it before the planning board on Monday night. As Elizabeth indicated, they endorsed it unanimously. It takes the limit of the number of wall signs off and has it instead be governed by area, the way the rest of the town is. There's no limitation in the rest of the town in Barnstable with respect to wall signage. It is a function of the amount of area that you can have. And it's allowed a few modest increases, one of which is to change the pylon sign out front from 150 to 170 total square footage. And so we would ask that the council consider this proposal favorably. It will be very important in terms of the mall being able to continue with the current releasing of the mall and the new facade that's being constructed there, and allow them to finish the negotiations with the tenants that are there. So that's the background, that's the need. We're hoping you'll support it, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilors, any questions of Attorney Ford or our Director of Planning and Development? What's your pleasure? I hear a move the question in a second. Could I get a vote on moving the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? In moving the question, I would ask for a vote on 2019-064 as written. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Oh, my apologies, roll call, 2/3. It's right in front of me. Thank you.
Counselors Biedenbender,
Yes.
Crocker,
Yes.
Cullen,
Yes.
Dagwan,
Yes.
Flores,
Yes.
Rapcorsetti,
Yes.
Hebert,
Yes.
Levesque,
Yes.
Schnepp,
Yes.
Wallace.
Yes.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. Simon appreciates it. And thank again your staff who worked with us closely. They did a great job, and we appreciate it.
Councilor Biedenbender, please. Could I get 2019-065? I'd ask Lindsay Council to join us.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is old business. This is a public hearing and a roll call vote. This is item number 2019-065, appropriation and transfer order in the amount of $38,000 for community preservation funds for acquisition of conservation restriction on 5.92 acres at 0 Bumps River Road, Marston's Mills, map 168, parcel 009, as written.
Second.
Thank you. I have a first and a second for the rationale, please.
Thank you, Council President Crocker, and I wanted to thank you and the council for taking the earlier items out of order and letting the folks break free. That's very considerate. The background for this is the town is seeking approval from the town council through the town manager for CPA open space and recreation funds in the amount of $38,000 for the acquisition of 0 Bumps River Road, Centerville, map 68, parcel 009. This funding request represents a portion of the total budget for the project of $115,300 with the $75,000 Massachusetts Conservation Land Tax Credit Program award to be provided and $2,300 provided by the Barnstable Land Trust. 0 Bumps River Road is a potentially developed 5.92 acre parcel of land on the Mill Pond, part of the Bumps River Wetland Corridor, which contains priority habitat for rare species. The town and the BLT have made significant investment in this area, and this parcel is the last remaining undeveloped lot on the west side of Mill Pond. The Land Acquisition and Preservation Committee voted unanimously to support its acquisition. The parcel was identified by the town as a priority acquisition property since the first open space plan in the 1980s, but was not available for purchase. The acquisition of this parcel for open space and passive recreation will protect water quality and wildlife along the Bumps River, Scuttle Bay, and Coombs Bog, preserve a scenic view of the Mill Pond from Bumps River Road, providing connection to 27 acres of town-owned land and the opportunity for public walking trails. Protection of the parcel from development will ensure preservation of archaeological resources, including artifacts, soil deposits, and features associated with ancient and historic period Native American populations. In this partnership, the Barnstable Land Trust will hold the conservation restriction. We have with us Janet Milkman, prepared to do a brief presentation on the property, and we'll be here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We will go to the public portion of it first, and then ask you to come forward, and councilors might have questions for you. We're open in a public hearing. Anybody who wishes to speak to this item as a public hearing, please come forward. Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion to close the public portion. So moved, seconded. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Opposed? Abstentions? Please.
Good evening, Janet Milkman, Executive Director of the Barnstable Land Trust. I think Lindsay and the order really summarized this project, but we have a couple of other slides, so I'll show them to you anyway and just reiterate that this has been a priority for the town since the first open space plan in 1980, and is also a priority for the state. Thank you. because its location and inclusion of critical landscape, the opportunity for coastal adaptation, and the location of priority habitats for rare species. And that's why the state is contributing via the conservation land tax credit of $75,000. And then, if you could just push it one more time, it's also really important for scenic character, and is really the final piece in the western side of the Mill Pond property, as seen here from Bumps River Road.
Terrific. Any questions of the council, please? Hearing none, I guess I got a motion to move the question. All those in favor of moving the question signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstention? This is a roll call vote, Madam Clerk. Won't catch me twice, same night.
Counselor Crocker,
Yes.
Cullum,
Yes.
Dagwan,
Yes.
Flores.
Yes.
Rapcorsetti.
Yes.
Hebert.
Yes.
Levesque.
Yes.
Schnapp.
Yes.
Wallace.
Yes.
Bender.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Coming up the pike, I'm asking for 2019-070. Councilor Rapcorsetti, please.
Under old business, may be acted upon item 2019-070, resolve acceptance of easement 307 Falmouth Road, Route 28, Hyannis, Mass, as written.
Thank you very much. And I see we have our Director of DPW, Dan Santos.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Town Council, Dan Santos, Director of Public Works. As part of the Mass DOT intersection improvements of Route 28 and Bursa's Way to the Cape Cod Mall entrance, Mass DOT entered into an agreement with the Department of Public Works for full reimbursement to relocate existing vacuum pits for each abutter along Route 28. The existing vacuum pits would not allow for vehicular traffic and had to be relocated off the shoulder. With many utility conflicts within this congested roadway, one vacuum pit that's located at 307 Falmouth Road will be required to be installed on private property and requires a permanent easement, which has been granted by the property owner at no fee. Acceptance of this easement is critical to the construction schedule for the Mass DOT project at the intersection of Route 28 and Bursa's Way. Department of Public Works Water Pollution Control staff require having access to this vacuum pit via this permanent easement for future operation and maintenance. There is no fiscal impact, as the operation and maintenance of the vacuum pit is within our existing operating budget.
Thank you very much, Dan. Councilors, this is a resolve. Is there any questions of our Director of Public Works? Yes, Councilor Rapcorsetti.
This is actually for Town Attorney. I wonder why this resolve needed two readings.
Good evening, councilors. Great to see everybody. Because it's an acceptance of an interest in land, we've reviewed this. There hasn't been, I think your question is well taken, there hasn't necessarily been consistency over the years in how we've treated these. But based on the new changes in the charter, I think that now this is requiring two readings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing no further discussion, I'd move the question at 219-070 to accept the resolve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I would ask that did we just move it or did we just accept it? So we will, let's vote on 2019-070, please. All those in favor of accepting 2019-070 as drafted, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Thank you. Councilor Wallace, 219-072.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is old business. This may be acted upon. It's item number 2019-072. order to create a water stabilization fund for the purpose of making comprehensive improvements to the town's drinking water and fire readiness services. Mr. President, this is a roll call vote, 2/3 required, as written.
Thank you, Councilor Wallace. We have Mark Milne, Director of Finance, for the rationale. Thank you, Mark.
Good evening, councilors, again. This is step one of a three-step process whereby we're asking the council to consider dedicating the host community payments negotiated with Vineyard Wind for a water stabilization fund to keep consistent with the intent of that agreement and what those host community payments were designed for. The town of Barnstable's water supply division is responsible for providing commercial and residential properties in Hyannis, Hyannisport, and West Hyannisport with safe, efficient, and effective means of obtaining drinking water and fire readiness services. The protection of this valuable resource is one of the highest priorities of the town. Over the past several years, the town has invested millions of dollars into the water system for new well exploration, treatment systems, distribution improvements, interconnections, and other systems and storage facilities. The creation of a stabilization fund for the purpose of making comprehensive improvements to the system of assets will assist with ensuring its safety, long-term reliability, and quality.
Thank you, Director. Any questions by the public? Hearing none. Questions by my council? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question, Mark. Once this water stabilization fund is established, in the rationale, it mentions Hyannis, Hyannisport, and West Hyannisport as part of that water system. But those monies could be used for any water project or program in the town?
Yeah, within our water enterprise fund, yes, our water system within that covers those areas, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Cullum?
Yeah, I just want to clarify for the public, we've spoken about a couple different water funds this evening, and one is for the state through the short-term rental, and this one is from Vineyard Wind that comes to our town directly. We have control over how we disperse that, as long as it's in our water system, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilor Snepp?
So I don't remember when we first approved the Vineyard Wind Host Community Agreement that we were planning to have all the fees dedicated to the water stabilization, or so when did that come into conversation? Or was it always contemplated but not fully communicated to the council?
I think that the intent behind that, when we read the host of community agreement, their concerns were that was protecting the water supply because it was where this transmission station is going to be located. It's upgrading of the water supply. So we wanted to, part of that negotiation was to make sure that the host community payments compensated us for the protection of that.
So if there were damages based on Vineyard Wind to the water supply, would we not have any ability to pursue them for those damages, other than through the receipt of the host community agreement?
Yes, but this also gives us another source with the continue the comprehensive improvements of that system. We had a plan done several years ago that indicated that we're going to need to invest millions of dollars into this system in order to bring it up to make sure it stays a high quality, safe, reliable system. And so this gives us an opportunity to dedicate those revenue sources to continue with that and mitigate the impact on the ratepayers.
So I realize how important that issue is, and that we all want clean water for all of our residents. But I'm just wondering if we're kind of mixing apples and oranges, that the revenue from the host community agreement really is a townwide revenue. I mean, that the Vineyard Wind is impacting various parts of our community and not just the water area that is, in the town water supply.
Yes, it is considered a general fund revenue, and so that's why we brought this forward, because we felt this asset is so important to the town that we wanted to ensure its protection, and the investment needed to continue with that investment into the system, that this revenue source, which should be dedicated to protect that valuable asset for us.
So at the risk of bringing up something controversial, we have in the town 5 independent fire and water districts. And it has seemed up until this point that we haven't crossed the lines in terms of what funds supported those fire and water districts. But it feels like to me that this is sort of one of those crossing the lines in which we're all of a sudden taking revenue that one could consider general fund revenue and dedicating it to one of our, what would be an independent water district if it wasn't under the town's management.
We have, we've been, in the process of evaluating alternative sites for wellheads, putting in treatment systems. We're currently putting in another treatment system. And with the considerations, you hear a lot about emerging contaminants as well. So this is going to put us in a good position to deal with all of that infrastructure that is on the horizon, which is going to probably be significantly more than what that host agreement payments are going to be.
If I may, Councilor Snepp, I would like to recognize the manager.
Good evening, Mark Ellis, Town Manager. Just to take a slight step back, there are 2 parts to the revenue that we see that comes in, assuming that Vineyard Wind reaches their objective here to obtain all permits and proceed with the project. One part is tax revenue for the town, for the districts, and other revenues. And then a host fee. There are also other conditions within that agreement that address specific issues like repaving a beach parking lot that might be disturbed, and roadways and utilities that might be disturbed, et cetera, et cetera. So there are many pieces to the revenue, or the offset of cost to be incurred relevant to the project. When we move to the discussion of the host fee, in phase 1, which is the one that is in the process of that's been awarded and that they're in the process of permitting, the focus of the $16 million was specifically the substation that is located up gradient of the Hyannis public water supply. And the thought was that, and in no way did the host fee exempt Vineyard Wind from any liability that might result from some failure of any part of their system in the town of Barnstable. So they would still be liable for that. The host fee was based specifically on replication of down gradient wells. That's what that $16 million was based on. And so that's why we felt appropriate to bring these forward. I think some of the earlier discussion this evening, and perhaps some of your questions, typically the various water districts in town fund their operations through user fees, but within any of the fire districts where the assets are located, they will also collect the appropriate taxes. So perhaps some of the earlier questions, we should be looking in the future to tax revenues to offset positions or other efforts as that request for use of those funds is positioned against other priorities within the community. So that was the thought behind this. That was the basis for the number. So, and I did discuss that as I proceeded through my negotiations with Vineyard Wind.
Councilor Rapcorsetti?
No mention in this item of Vineyard Wind. So this stabilization fund could be funded with Vineyard Wind monies, with grants, with all sorts of monies, right?
Creating the stabilization fund This is just creating the stabilization fund. We haven't identified the revenue source yet. That's coming up in the next couple of items.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Councilor Biedenbender?
Thank you, President Crocker. Just to clarify, so the agreement with Vineyard Wind is in two parts. There's the tax revenue part, and then there's the host fee part. This stabilization fund, based on the business that's coming forward later on this agenda, it is the host fee that would fund the stabilization fund. That amount is $16 million. If I remember correctly, from tax revenue to be generated over the life of Vineyard Wind, we're looking at about 19 million, if I remember correctly. I think it's total like 35 million for the life of the
Yeah, I'd have
agreement.
to, I'd have to look at the numbers. It
Roughly.
all depends on what our assessor and DOR recognize the asset value at, and then what the taxation would be on that.
Yep.
Within the agreement, it talks about no more than, it was $1.53 million a year. So, depending on what the taxation would be, the host fee might actually be collected not in the 25-year period of the agreement, but in 16 years if the earlier years were less or personal property tax, and we would get more host fee. So we can run scenarios for you if you'd like to see what our thoughts might be. Not having the asset in place yet or even permitted, it's a hypothetical scenario. But
Okay, thanks.
yes.
And I apologize, I know this is sort of cart before the horse, because this is really part of the next piece.
Yes, definitely.
So this one is just the creation of the stabilization fund.
To fund it in the next upcoming.
Okay,
Also, I
thank
might
you.
point out that there's two phases that were proposed to get us to the 30 mil. So we should talk that it's several phases away and several permits away as well. Thank you. Any further questions? Move the question, second. All those in favor of moving the question? Any opposition? Any naysayers? Any abstentions? Hearing none, I'd send it to the clerk for a 2/3 vote.
Councilors Cullum,
Yes.
Dagwan,
Yes.
Flores,
Yes.
Rapp-Corsetti.
Yes.
Hebert.
Yes.
Levesque,
Yes.
Schnapp,
Yes.
Wallace,
Yes.
Biedenbender,
Yes.
Crocker.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. Please let the vote be recorded. I'm on 2019-073. I would ask Councilor Cullum to please read us in.
Yes, item number 2019-073 may be acted upon with a roll call majority. Order to accept the fourth paragraph of Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B, allowing for the dedication of certain revenue streams to stabilization funds without further appropriation as written.
I have a first and a second. Thank you. May I get the rationale, please? Again, from the Director of Finance, Mark Mill.
Thank you, Mr. President. In order to dedicate the revenue stream identified in the next item, the first step we have to do is to accept this paragraph of Mass General Law, which gives the Town Council the authorization to dedicate a specific revenue stream to a stabilization fund. And that can be anywhere from 25% to 100% of that identified revenue source, which will be coming up in your next item before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on 2019-073 of the council? We had some good questions last time. Okay, we have a first and a second. Oh, we do have a question.
Just a
Thank
quick
you.
one.
Council Schnapp.
So this order is not specific to any particular fund. So by approving this, are we basically saying in any time that we set up any type of fund, we're allowing this to happen?
Yeah, we're allowing the council the authorization to identify a revenue stream for that particular stabilization fund. And so once we accept this, you will then have the power to do so.
But it's not for just this stabilization fund, it could be for any.
For any stabilization fund in the future, yes.
is it fair to say, as a follow-up to Councilor Snap, that this is a correction so that all these funds will match up in the future as we go forward and as we bring them to this council?
Yes.
Okay. Is that comfortable, Councilor Snap? Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much. All those in favor of moving the question signify by saying aye. Any opposition? Any abstention? 2/3? No. Nope. Simple majority, and I would ask the clerk to call it, please.
Councilors Dagwan,
Yes.
Flores,
Yes.
Rapcrissetti.
Yes.
Hebert.
Yes?
Levesque,
Yes.
Schnepp,
Yes.
Wallace,
Yes.
Biedenbender,
Yes.
Crocker,
Yes.
Cullum.
Yes.
That is unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I would go down to Councilor Dagwan, please. Could you read us in on 2019-074?
Yes, Mr. President. Item 2019-074, order to dedicate future host community agreement payments from the Vineyard Wind to the Water Stabilization Fund. And this requires a roll call vote as well.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second, I have a second, duly noted. Again, for the rationale, please, the Director of Finance, Mark Milne.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the third and final step in order to proceed with this action. This requests that we dedicate 100% of the host community payments to that water stabilization fund, and this vote will do so if you would like.
Hoping this raises some questions. I'm looking to my counselors. Any questions on the issue? Terrific. I don't hear any. With that in mind, I'd move 2019-074 to the clerk for a 2/3 vote.
Councilors Flores,
Yes.
Rapcrissetti,
Yes.
Hebert,
Yes.
Levesque,
Yes.
Schnepp,
No.
Wallace,
Yes.
Biedenbender,
Yes.
Crocker,
Yes.
Cullum,
Yes.
Dagwan.
Yes.
That's 9 yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Councilor Snap, please. 076. New business.
New business may be acted upon, item 2019-076. Resolved to authorize the town council president to delegate the responsibility to serve as an ex officio member of all town council committees to the vice president in the absence of the president.
Do I have a second? Thank you. I have a first and a second. In the rationale side of it, I guess this would be appropriate for me to speak to this, if I may. I'm very pleased to have a vice president who seems to be interested in assisting any way possible and attending meetings and getting out in front of any and all the issues and trying to let leadership show up in as many areas as possible. In reviewing our rules, it appears clear that I have to ask permission to have our vice president to act as an ex officio member in my absence. So we would never have more than one member. We may be there together, and there may be other people there, but we would never have more than one ex officio member at any time. That is, I'm here to answer any questions that anyone might have of the resolve that's in front of you. Yes.
If I could ask
Councilor Rapcrissetti.
Attorney Weil, does ex officio allow for the member to vote as a committee member?
No, because the way this is framed, thank you for the question. The president or vice president in his or her stead serves as an incidental member, don't have to appear at every meeting, don't count for the quorum, so they can participate in the discussion, but they are not a voting member.
Okay. And the president and vice president can't act as chair of committee standing or ad hocs?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
We had lengthy discussions about that today as well. We will be addressing that in the future as we go forward. Tonight, it's just about the ability to appoint the vice president as ex officio member in my absence. Any further questions? Move the question. I have a first and a second. All those in favor of moving the question signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstention? Hearing none, I'd move the question 2019-076 as drafted. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstention? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. On new business, Council Cullum, 2019-077 may be acted upon.
Yes, item 2019-077, acceptance of fiscal year 2019 Mass Wildlife Habitat Management Grant in the amount of $11,820 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for the West Barnstable Conservation Area as written.
Thank you very much. First and second, we have Elizabeth Jenkins, Director of Planning and Development, with us today for the rationale. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, President Crocker. I am here tonight on behalf of the Planning and Development's Conservation Division to proudly announce that we have been awarded this grant from Mass Wildlife for management of the West Barnstable Conservation Area. This will allow us to conduct, in conjunction with the West Barnstable Fire District, a controlled burn within the conservation area to promote habitat management as well as recreational value.
Any questions? Councilors, move the question, then a second. All those in favor of moving the question signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstention? All those in favor of 219-077 as drafted, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstention? Please record it as unanimous. We have under new business 2019-078. Councilor Wallace, will you take us through?
Thank you, Mr. President. New business, item number 2019-078, acceptance of fiscal year 2019 Planning Assistance Grant in the amount of $50,000 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to revise zoning and regulatory requirements for increased housing production in downtown Hyannis as written.
Second, please. I have a second. We have, again, our Director of Planning and Development. Please, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much. This is an award of $50,000, a planning assistance grant from EOEEA to allow us to look at the zoning and regulatory requirements around housing in downtown Hyannis. This project has started off with a partnership with the Cape Cod Commission and architectural firm Union Studios. Hopefully you were able to join us at our kickoff meeting earlier this year, where we are reaching out to the Hyannis community to ask them to look at types of housing that they feel are most appropriate for infill in downtown Hyannis, both the form and the scale of housing. Using this public outreach as a precursor to this project, we hope to look at the zoning, specifically the zoning as it relates to housing in the downtown Hyannis Growth Incentive Zone and surrounding districts to look at potential revisions that would increase housing production. One of the things that we have seen sort of in our experience over the past several years of negotiating regulatory agreements is that while they are an effective way to bring some of these projects forward, and while it's always a delight to bring them forward to you, what we've heard from the planning board is to take a close look at our zoning to make sure it is right-sized and that we are easing the process for approval of these projects that we feel do reflect our community values in terms of housing. So again, the goal here is to look at our housing zoning in downtown Hyannis based on the community input that we're receiving in phase 1 of this project to see where we can promote as of right infill of housing in downtown Hyannis. I hope you all take a moment to take the survey that's out right now. It's at capecodcommission.org/survey. Again, that looks to sort of test the community's appetite for different forms of type of housing, and join us on February 11th at 5:30 for an additional meeting to discuss this project.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the councilors to our Director of Planning and Development? Start down the end. Councilor Hebert.
Thank you. Has anyone else reported that I had problems when I tried to open the survey link? It wouldn't open. I don't know if anyone has experienced that. It opened, but then it said that it couldn't find that particular survey from the Cape Cod Commission.
Okay, that's actually the first time I've heard that, but we will certainly work with them to take a look.
It may have something to do with how I handle this, but I just want to double check. Technology. Thank you very much.
You and I both, Councilor
I'll
Hebert.
take a look and we'll make sure to send that link again to you.
I'm working my way up. Any other councilors? Councilor Biedenbender?
Thank you. I attended that Union Studios meeting, and it was very informative, and I enjoyed it, and I've yet to do my survey, so I will get on that this weekend. I have to say, you learn something every day. I had no idea that EOEA did this kind of stuff, so that was a little bit of a surprise. It's great to see that we're moving forward on some of these big issues. I mean, you know, from the Water Stabilization Fund to this, making forward progress on these major issues that are affecting our town and seeing some real tangible moves forward. Just out of curiosity, the housing production plan that was done a couple of years ago, how is that being enacted? Where are we at with that in the context of this piece and moving forward in general with our housing production?
Sure, so we continue to work through the recommendations in that housing production plan, one of them being very explicitly to look at zoning in our village centers to promote more as-of-right housing and streamline those permitting processes. So in terms of housing production, at least in downtown Hyannis, permitting units, again, sort of the area where our housing needs assessment identified where we had the greatest need for housing, both market rate rentals and affordable rentals. We feel like this will be an important component to implementing some of the strategies outlined in that plan. But I will note, housing continues to be a priority issue. We would certainly welcome the opportunity to come again before the council to start to develop some sort of a housing implementation master plan, again, to make sure that we are sort of evaluating all options for housing production and moving the ones forward that the council thinks are the highest priorities.
Yes, follow-up, please.
Just a follow-up comment. I think that would actually be wonderful if we could, very much like we have on our wastewater, sort of periodic updates on how we're moving forward with housing, if that's possible.
Certainly we'll make that note, and we were fortunate enough to have her out many nights and assist us, so we'll try to appoint an update on that. And certainly Mark can update that as well in his manager's report. Are you all set? Councilor Rappacetti, you all set? Oh, I'm sorry, going this way. Do I hear anything? Looks like we're satisfied. Here.
Deb.
Oh, I'm sorry, Deb, please.
Elizabeth, you
Councilor
talked about
Dagwan.
the survey. When do you plan, is there a term limit or time limit that you'd like to have people respond to them?
At this point, we will have the survey open through the end of the month. So if we could receive responses by January 30th, that would be ideal. That will help us make sure we have enough time to prepare for that February 11th meeting so we can sort of digest those responses and bring them back to the community, develop some next steps.
Is there another way they could be dispensed? Because there are a lot of people that I know that don't work with computers and online, where they could just kind of hand fill them out, kind of thing.
Sure, we can definitely look at that. I mean, it is a sort of a visual preference survey, so it's again sort of a very sort of lends itself to that online platform. But I'll certainly work with the commission and our housing coordinator, and perhaps we can come up with some other options.
Thank you.
Any other council questions? Hearing no further questions, I'll call for the vote on 2019-078 as drafted. All those in favor of 2019-078, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstention? Please record that as unanimous. Councilor Rappacetti, could you assist me, please, on 2019-079?
This is new business may be acted upon. 2019-079, transfer order of $50,000 to fund a qualified consultant to facilitate public outreach and to revise and draft regulations pertaining to short-term rental of dwelling units as written.
Thank you very much. Again, we have the Director of Planning and Development, and we also do have our Director of Finance, if it's appropriate. Please.
Yep, one more time. So, as a follow-up to the presentation that my colleagues and I made on short-term rentals, the new legislation, which did come out December 28th of last year, sets new parameters for municipalities in terms of obligations and options to regulate short-term rentals. As we saw in our discussion, these regulations are already impacting renters in our community, and I think our ability as a community to respond quickly and efficiently to residents' questions about how they are able to rent their dwelling unit is imperative. At this point, now that we do have this regulated and taxed short-term rental industry operating in the town of Barnstable. So as I spoke to earlier, I envision this being a joint effort between the Planning and Development Department as well as with Brian Florence, our building commissioner, and Health Department, to make sure we're both, again, sort of looking at our community values around short-term rentals, making sure it protects our residents' quality of life, thinking about the impact this plays on our seasonal economy and on our housing market and supply, developing appropriate and right-sized regulations for short-term rentals, and then a predictable and manageable structure for enforcing and regulating short-term rentals going forward. So again, this request is being made out of the Town Council Reserve Fund as a result of the time frame, again, in which we hope to respond to this legislation, and we thank you for your support in this.
Thank you. Could I ask one quick question? Could I ask a clarification from our Director of Finance? This is one of the first times we've actually used this fund, so I think we should just revisit that issue. Thank you, Councilor Rappacetti, for bringing that forward as well.
Yes, so as part of the fiscal year 2019 budget development process, for the first time, we created a Town Council Reserve Fund. By doing so allows us to react in a quicker manner towards addressing issues that come up. If we could have brought forward to you a funding source for this item being that of the general fund reserve. That would require 2 readings, a 30-day waiting period before the funds become available after that. So we're almost looking into the end of March before we could do anything. Appropriating it from your reserve will allow us to act quickly and go and find that qualified consultant immediately.
Is there also an opportunity for it to be reimbursed at some point as well?
The funding source for this appropriation is the general fund reserve, so we can certainly make sure that the first $50,000 of any revenue that comes from short-term rental properties goes back to replenish our general fund reserve.
So we all understand this is the exact purpose we voted for. We have another article later that is a inconsequential problem with an HVAC system that is very dire as well. So here's the first couple times we've had to use it. Any council questions? Yes, Councilor Hebert.
Am I correct in saying that the balance then would be 200,000?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Good math, Councilor Hebert, thank you. Anybody else? Hearing none, I would move 2019-079 in for a vote as drafted. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Please record it as unanimous. Thank you very much. I would go down to Councilor Biedenbender to ask for some assistance on 2019-080.
Thank you, President Crocker. I'll assist where I can. This is new business, first reading. This is item number 2019-080, authorization for the Airport Commission to enter into a 49-year lease for the property identified as map 311, parcel 092, and addressed as 790 INO Road, Route 132, Hyannis, Mass, as written.
Thank you very much. We are fortunate enough to have a bench rider along with us tonight, the airport manager, Katie Severs. I'd ask her to come forward, and I'd also ask our town manager to discuss why it's in front of us, and then Katie could tell us how her group handled it.
Actually, if it's okay, Town Manager Mark Ells, I'll allow Katie to come up and do her presentation, and I'll answer any questions relevant to the request before you after she does that. So,
Thank you very much.
Katie, thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you, President Crocker and councilors. The authorization is for the Airport Commission to enter into a 49-year lease for the property that we presently know as Cape Town Plaza, or Kmart Plaza. According to Mass General Law, Chapter 90, the Airport Commission, wishing to let or lease property that's in excess of 20 years, must do so in the form of asking for approval through a town entity through the town council. And that is the purpose that we're coming forward to, today. Due to the nature of the property and its potential use, a term lease that's less than 20 years is really inappropriate. It does not allow any potential developer to amortize their mortgage that they put on the property. It also puts the airport in a situation where they're not looking at the net benefits that they can generate from that parcel of land. So that's why we're going forward and asking for a 49-year lease. The reason why is stipulated as 49 years is because typically, because the airport receives many funding grants from the FAA, typically the FAA looks at anything that is beyond 49 years, 50 years plus, as really a disposition of the property. So 49 years is typically the cap that the FAA will look at for approval of any type of lease, and that's why we're coming forward with simply the up to a 49-year lease request. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Yes, and councils, I might suggest that we have a couple committee members here that worked on it as well. If there's any questions, we have our Assistant Town Manager, Andy Claiborne, and we do have Director of Finance, Mark Milton. Councilors, any questions? Yes, Councilor Biedenbender. We'll start this way and come here.
Two items. One is directly related to this, and the other is sort of a sidebar for clarification. Could you just share sort of the revenue that the town is expecting over the course of this 49-year lease?
Sure. The revenue that's projected is just under or over 150 million for the life of the lease, and that includes every 10 years we have a look back that makes sure that it's still at fair market value. We also have increases annually at least 3% annual increases for gross revenues. So all in all, it's in alignment with the fair market value that was assessed for the property.
Okay, thank you. And then the other piece is actually, it's related to this project, and it just comes to mind because I've had a number of people ask me about it, and it's also been in the paper a couple of times, and it's in relation to the housing issue, the development of housing as part of that development. And through my conversations with you, Andy Clyburn, you know, I understand much better where the FAA sits in this, and sort of what we can and cannot do as a town as far as the developer's concerned, expectations for housing. But I don't think the public knows that, or there is some misinformation out there. The Cape Cod Times has erroneously reported a couple times regarding the housing issue, and I was just wondering if you could just clarify what is could be reasonably expected, what we are allowed to ask, what the FAA restrictions are, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Please.
I'll start with, first off, the FAA restrictions. Typically, housing is not something that's deemed compatible with airport development. As you might expect, there are concerns with, you know, potential noise levels that are associated being in close proximity to an airport. So typically, when we look at land that is in management of the airport, you know, in custody of the airport for management, they typically will not look at a property and advise housing development. However, in response to the strategic plan for the town that has been identified housing as a need for this area, The proposal did come across and identify ways that they could meet that strategic plan. I think at this point in time, because we haven't started looking at the full development, we received a proposal that said, these are the types of things that we can do on the parcel. I think that the detail that we need to get into is forthcoming. So I don't want to give you a set of, yes, we're going to do this or we can't do this. I'll give you the information that the FAA will not allow, and that's housing. But they have approached us through the proposal at looking at alternatives to at least address the town's concerns. You're welcome.
Process?
Thank you. I just want to point out that this will be the first read. We'll have a terrific opportunity to discuss this if we move it to a date certain on February 7th or something. So I would like, okay, now we have, it's going to February 7th. We have a motion to advance this as the first read to February 7th.
Will that be a public hearing?
No,
Or is it just a
not
second
as-
read?
it's just an authorization from us.
Okay.
But it'll be discussion to any length with our assistant town manager or committee members or whatever's appropriate for us. So we have a motion to move this to the first read on February 7th. That's 2019-080 as drafted. All those in favor? Oh, it's so moved. Second? All
Thank
those in
you.
favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. We'll
Thank
see
you.
you on the 7th. Thank you. Councilor Levesque, would you please help me with 2019-081?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is new business and may be acted upon. This is item number 2019-081. It's a transfer order in the amount of $45,000 to fund the replacement of the heating, ventilation, cooling, otherwise known HVAC system at the Hyannis Golf Course Clubhouse as written.
I might point out to everybody again, this is from our town council reserve, which may be acted upon tonight. So thank you and for the indulgence on the last one as well. Yes, Director of DPW, how are you?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Dan.
The Golf Division is seeking emergency procurement assistance and funds to replace a failed HVAC unit that's responsible for heating and cooling at the Hyannis Golf Course Clubhouse building. A FY 2020 decision package has been submitted for the replacement of this system. However, the unit suffered a catastrophic failure recently and has been deemed inoperable and irreparable. The unit is over 20 years old and beyond its useful life. The restaurant and function rooms are open year-round for business. It is essential that we replace the system expeditiously, not only for the facility users, but to prevent potential freeze damage due to the building's water pipes. Funding this unforeseen expenditure from the Town Council Reserve Fund will allow the town to go forward immediately with the replacement of this essential system to the golf operations. A subsequent agenda item will be brought forward to reimburse the general fund with a transfer from the Golf Course Enterprise Fund when the project has been completed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Any questions? This may be acted upon. Councilors? We know the account. We know how it works.
Move the question.
I get a motion to move the question and a second. All those in favor of moving the question? Any opposition? Any abstentions? Moving 2019-081, I'm looking for all those in favor. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Please record that as unanimous. There are cries on the bench, Councilor Hebert. For you to-
Councilor Hebert, how much do we have left now on that account?
Cries on the bench for you to give us a mathematical accounting.
How much do we have left in that account now?
I would ask you to assist me, Councilor Hebert, with 2019-082, please.
Well, just making sure that I'm past my neurological testing. Yes. So, I don't need technology to do that. Councilor Levesque reminded me that, On an off day, I do, but, thank you, Mr. President. Item number 2019-082, acceptance of fiscal year 2019 legislative earmark grant in the amount of $45,000 from the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health for the purpose of funding homeless outreach sheltering services in the event of severe cold temperatures. This may be acted upon tonight.
I get a first and a second. We are fortunate to have both our manager and our chief of police with us tonight. Town manager.
Good evening. Mark Ells. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this. A year ago, we were faced with the challenge of trying to assist in housing difficult to house homeless individuals, and were called upon through our police department in coordination with various agencies here locally to contribute toward putting these individuals in a safe environment, getting them indoors. And as a result of that, our state legislature, and specifically my discussions have been with Julian Sear, put forward a request for $45,000 in the form of a earmark grant from the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health for the purposes of funding an effort when this sort of situation arises. This is a one-time earmark, though we can certainly go in repetitively and make these types of requests. I apologize for any confusion I may have created, and it was me who created it, relevant to the justification that would support the council's consideration of accepting this $45,000. We've spent many hours talking about how at times the focus is centralized here in Hyannis, and my initial thought in receiving the $45,000 was that we would reach out to our fellow communities and apportion this so that perhaps each community, 4 or 5 of them, would receive a set amount of that money. And I did reach out to managers and administrators, Collins and Kapnick and Sullivan in our abutting towns, and discussed this and made it known that this is available and will be available once accepted. As I spoke with our staff and looked at how we actually manage the 16 to 20 individuals that were identified to us, it was clear that Barnstable and Yarmouth coordinated with Duffy, and they typically use the In From the Streets program to find hotel motel available space to get these individuals out of the cold. And so in the justification that I've provided, I wrote it to reflect what I found to be actually occurring. Even within this, I think that the apportionment of funds could be incorrect. I wanted to make sure that our PD, and as we coordinate with Duffy, that we had administration funds, that there were funds available appropriately to place individuals in hotel rooms in the respective communities where these individuals are identified, and do it quickly. And certainly coordinating with the agency that has done that in the past successfully is a way to ensure that. I don't know that the actual expenditure by community will be exactly what I've identified. This is the first time we've had these resources, but I think that given what we see coming on Sunday and Monday, this could occur very quickly. This is described as a reimbursable expense, so we incur the expense, we submit it to the state, we get the money back. It has been suggested to me by Senator Sear that most likely we would receive those funds, so directly, prior to that. So we will pursue that to find out, and I will let you know. But I'm assuming it is as written in the contract, which says reimbursable. I have reached out to Town Manager Kapnick next door in Yarmouth, and he was appreciative of the regional view of this. So was Manager Collins. And I talked to Elizabeth Sullivan's staff, and I'll talk with her more if and when this progresses. But it also came clear to me that this is a specific issue here because the other communities weren't necessarily challenged with this last winter. So we also are going to look very carefully to make sure we place the individuals in those respective communities in hotels there, so that we're not centralizing this in any way. And we're very mindful of that as we go forward. And we've got the commitment of our entire team and those other support agencies knowing of that and willing to work with us to that end. So I would ask that you please approve this as we move forward, and I will report back to you on its success and actually how we see us utilizing this so that in future requests they can be more reflective of exactly how we want this to service those in need.
Thank you very much, Town Manager. This is an interesting earmark. We haven't seen it before. We have had some discussions about how to divide it up, how to get it out the door, who can use it. We are fortunate enough to have our Chief of Police here if there are any questions. So, councilors, any questions? Yes, Councilor Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mark, for your good work with this, and certainly kudos go out to Senator Sear and also to the Department of Mental Health. The Department of Mental Health, decades ago, there was we're all aware of the fact that many of the institutions were closed, and the subsequent tragic situation of people on the streets with severe mental illness has presented every community in Massachusetts with serious concerns. I also want to extend my heartfelt thanks and appreciation of our Barnstable Police Department that we know has done an outstanding job. They know who the individuals are. They go out, they find them, they take care of them. They expend personal energy and resources to make sure that people are safe. And so thank you to you, Chief, and to your fine department. Thank you so much. I do want to point out that I like the approach that you have to not to make it regional. And so I would ask you to continue to reach out, for instance, to the town of Falmouth, that has done some tremendous work with homeless individuals. They have a program called Belonging to Each Other, and they've been very, very successful. They have taken people who just cannot find other housing in the winter, and they have housed them, and then they have very, very successfully high ratio of getting them into permanent housing, so they're no longer on file. So I hope that we can reach out and make sure that places like Falmouth know that people don't have to come to Hyannis if they're in a predicament, that they can reach out to through your good office and through our police department and make sure that it stays as a regional approach and not us trying to do it all ourselves. So thank you very, very much.
Along those lines, the monies can also be used, assuming that there are monies available after this winter for planning. So certainly I've made it clear as the recipient town that we do have concerns about just assuming that Barnstable is where this issue will be brought. This is a regional issue. I've shared it with the three other communities, 4 of us total. So if we have remaining funds and we can use it for planning, perhaps we can have those discussions and utilize those resources to augment and look at what Falmouth. It's been pointed out that I believe Falmouth and Provincetown both have programs, and that's why actually it was suggested that, well, let's stay within the group that immediately surrounds this area of Cape Cod. And so I would hope to do that, the outcome being a more regional approach to this and more specific to the locations where the individuals are located.
Thank you, Councilor Hebert. Town Manager. Yes, Councilor Cullum.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the clear message you're sending there. That's one that we've been working on for the 8 years that I've been a counselor. And I'm going to start kind of from the beginning with the Homelessness Committee and talking about how Hyannis in particular, but Barnstable in general, bears the burden of this very sensitive population. And I'll back up and say thank you to Senator Sear for giving the municipality the money. because I think it gives us an opportunity to show where our priorities are. Number one being that we save the most vulnerable people that need the shelter. Number two, that we protect the good work on Main Street that people have been doing, our economic engine that we're trying to grow there by not saturating it in the winter months with people in need in a hotel at the end on West Main Street. It's a major concern for me. Another major concern for me, however, it's kind of bittersweet, is that the town is awarded the money through the police department, which then is an equal footing with the social services agency. And I have grave concerns that our police department, instead of being involved in enforcement like they were 20, 25 years ago, are now on par with Duffy, because of the amount of energy and effort and resources and time and compassion and all of these good things that make them a fantastic police department, that all of their energies are going there. So I'm thankful that the town has the opportunity to administer the grant, and we'll be very watchful about it, and that you're talking about the regional approach that I brought up 5 or 6 years ago, and that the Homelessness Committee beats their head against a stone wall over once a month, trying to have the message heard that Barnstable and particularly Hyannis can't bear the burden of the problem themselves, although we would never back away from the burden, ever. I see it as an opportunity to further that regional idea of homelessness, but I want to make it really clear that I believe our police department is a police department, not a social services agency. And I just hope that we reflect on that when we're given grants like this. And I'm thankful for the opportunity for the town to implement it. So then if we implement the grant, we shouldn't then undo all the work we've done in the Homelessness Committee by putting it all on Main Street. So thank you for reaching out to communities. I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate the conversations that we've had regarding the grant and your sensitivity to that. I more than anything, I want to say that we want to help the most vulnerable in our community. We always want to help. And I would never, ever, ever refuse money to help that. But I think it's time to take a step back and look at what we're doing, how we're allocating our resources with regard to this problem, especially if we happen to have a neighbor next door that's willing to use services too and could maybe help shoulder the burden. So thank you very much for indulging me in my opinion on that, but I think it's really time we take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Cullum. Any other councilors? Yes, Vice President.
Just regarding protocol in terms of how this is implemented, based on the backup information, it's for 20 persons for 20 days. $30,000 is not going to get you very far, to be quite frank. And I'm curious what happens when that portion of the money runs out. What happens to those 20 people? And what if there are more than 20 people? And could you also define extreme weather? When does this kick in to garner those, collectively gather those people and help them out? Is there a protocol? Is there a series of?
There is protocol that's utilized. I'll get you the statistics or the temperatures which trigger that sort of mobilization. I don't have it off the top of my head. And what was the first question?
In terms, its length of dollars also coupled with the fact what if
It
there's
was
more than 20 people?
It was an estimate to augment a process that was already in place, to supplement a process that was already in place, that we ran out of money for last year, and we actually, through our police department, were able to provide some limited support and get people out. But you're absolutely right that a long, cold spell, and if there are more individuals than is estimated, we would probably be going in to look at any and all. I mean, certainly the service agencies that are out there and their mechanisms to generate revenue. They could certainly come to the town of Barnstable and the various funds that we have, which occurred last year. The state, again. So this was a first effort based on an estimate to try to get a little more money in to supplement a challenge that they know we have here in this region. That's all. And as Councilor Cullum very appropriately pointed out, our police department has gone above and beyond on many issues, certainly this being one of them, and I think that's why they were recognized as a recipient of these funds. I'm glad that we have control. I think next time you'll see myself and our surrounding managers, you coming together and making a larger request there, and perhaps it'll be administered differently next year if we're fortunate enough to get additional funds.
I would agree with Councilor Cullum in terms of how our police department is servicing this particular population. I mean, this is the ultimate definition of really community policing, which I'm not quite sure that's what our department's charged for. But just one final comment.
Yes,
Have
sir.
we identified in Hyannis and in Barnstable and in Yarmouth where these hotels, where these motels, where people would go? So this is all set up methodically?
Yes,
So
I have gone through the list, and I've also been sensitive to the concerns that we here have experienced in Barnstable and Hyannis. Chief, did you want to add to that?
Thank you. We have Chief Matthew Sonneban.
Good evening, Chief Sonneban, Barnstable Police Department. A lot of the research on the numbers of who came from what we went through last year and what through the Community Impact Unit and Duffy was with the Out of the Street. So the number 20, I've been told, really comes from the most chronic people they had to deal with, the ones that were the hardest to house, the ones that were banned from other locations. So that's where they got that number from. And then the amount of monies was based on what they might need to put them somewhere, provide security, administrative services, and other things like that. So that was a best guesstimate based on a number that they had from last year. Could it be short? It could be short, because there could end up being more this year depending on how the weather goes. And as far as the temperatures they were talking about, it would be closer to the single digit or even 0 degree temperatures. They're not talking just the regular 32 or even 20 degree temperatures. They're talking really extreme cold, which unfortunately this weekend you're looking at wind chills and snow and ice and everything else. So that could fall into that category. Yep.
Any other questions of either the manager or the police chief? Yes, Councilor Hebert.
Thank you, and kind of in the form of an continue, and it's not to make it a big conversation, but the fact is, it has never been my intention that our police department become a social service, but we all look at your police department as that front line of safety and when things get, out of hand. But the real issue, and some of this, if there is money left over, we always have to look at the fact that we did not create this problem. The state created the problem when we closed institutions and when we reduced the beds. The state was supposed to create more housing, group homes, support systems, and it has fallen on individual communities within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to take care of this. So the problem is a Massachusetts problem, and in some ways, the Commonwealth has put the burden on our individual communities, and we have responded very, very well. But no one should be confused. What my intent is that the Department of Mental Health should be stepping more to the plate and getting more funding so that the most needy and the most mentally brain diseased individuals are cared for appropriately. So I don't want any confusion here what I'm trying to say. There is problems. I'm thankful for this money. I don't want our police department to be extra burdened with how you're going to take care of individuals. This money is to soften your workload and make it easier for you to do your job, but not to create a social agency.
I would agree with you, but unfortunately, sometimes you're the victim of your own success. And I'll be honest with you, when I first got into law enforcement, this really wasn't you didn't think you'd be doing what you do today. Right. But as we all know, one of the only places that's open 24/7, 365 are the police and fire departments. And because a lot of these social agencies or state agencies are closed on weekends, closed at nights, not available, or have limited outreach workers, by default, the patrol officer and the firefighter become those outreach workers. And what kind of people would we be if we just turned a blind eye and let it go? I mean, we still have to do the best we can to solve the problem, but then therein the other agencies have to pick up the ball and run with it. We can identify the people, we can get them to their door, but they have to open the door and continue the mission.
Correct.
And hopefully this is a step in that right direction.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for your assistance.
Thank you.
I have a motion to move the question and a second. All those in favor of moving the question?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any no? On 2019-082, all those in favor of it as drafted, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Please record that as unanimous. I am on to 2019-084. I would ask Councilor Cullum to read it into the record, please.
That's what I get for mouthing off. I got it. Okay. This is a first read, item number 2019-084, appointments to a board or committee and commission. The resolve that the town council appoints the following individuals to a multiple member board, committee, or commission. Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission. Jonathan Cantor, 17 Ash Circle, Katuitt, as a regular member holding a real estate license to a term expiring 6/20, and to the Zoning Board of Appeals, Paul Pinard, from an associate member to a full member for a term expiring 6/19, as written.
Do I have a second? Second? Yes, Councilor Rep.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to bifurcate the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission applicant Jonathan Cantor.
I would take an amendment to bifurcate. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Would you like to have a rationale on that, please?
Yes, I'm in receipt as chair of the Appointments Committee. We received from Cheryl Powell, the chair of this Hyannis Main Street Historic District Commission, a letter respectfully requesting that this member be approved at this meeting so that they can meet quorum. They've had concerns with quorum, and as our next meeting on February 7th, where the second reading will take place, it will fall after their next meeting. They've asked that this applicant be put forward and voted on tonight.
Thank you very much. Let's vote to bifurcate that, and then let's come back and vote the zoning board for its regular position, and then let's vote on the bifurcated one. Couple steps in there, but it's really good stuff. So, all those in favor of bifurcating it, setting it aside for the next vote, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? So, setting that aside, we're back to our original 2019-084 as amended. Any discussion there? Hearing no more discussion, I would call 2019-084 as amended for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposition? Any abstention? Please record that as going forward to a second read on February 7th. Now on the point of the bifurcation to appoint Jonathan Cantor, 17 Ash Circle, Katuitt. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Please record that John Cantor has been appointed tonight to the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront District by unanimous vote. I do have, if I could, Councilor Rep. Cressetti, get you for 2019-085, please.
Yes, Mr. President, this is new business, refer to a second reading on February 7th, 2019, item 2019-085, reappointments to a board, committee, or commission. Resolved, the town council reappoints the following individuals to a multiple member board, committee, or commission. Steamship Authority, Eric Schufelt as the town of Barnstable representative member to a term expiring 12/31/2019.
Thank you very much. And Councilor Rep. Cressetti, thank you and your committee for your work on appointments. Very difficult job, but thank you for pushing these forward. I have a motion on the floor to move 2019-085 to a read on February 7th. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Please record that as unanimous. All right, you guys, who wants to close the door for me?
Motion to adjourn?
I hear a motion to adjourn and a second, and all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposition? Thank you very much.